Chapter 646. Lu Hong had never imagined that his 8-year-old son would not only want to kill the emperor and usurp the throne, but also want to cut his father into 1,000 pieces. Just how sinister and vicious did he have to be to do such a thing? At this moment, Lu Hong's anger and boundless fear were like a raging fire that burned more and more fiercely. Then, he saw Lu Hong's body fiercely tremble. "Beast? Old bastard, don't you think about who I am? You still dare to curse me like this?" When Lu Xie heard this, he coldly smiled and brazenly slapped Lu Hong's face with his dagger. "Lu Xie, you brat! If you dare to touch a single hair on His Majesty's head, even if I become a ghost, I won't let you go." Zhongli, who was paralyzed on the ground, harshly roared as he glared at Lu Xie, his eyes spitting fire. But no matter how he struggled, it was useless. He couldn't move at all. If someone familiar with Zhongli saw Zhongli's current behavior, they would immediately realize that Zhongli was putting on an act. To be more precise, Zhongli clearly knew that he couldn't call for help, yet he still angrily attacked Lu Xie. In truth, Zhongli knew that even if Lu Xie succeeded, he wouldn't let him go. This was because the person Zhongli was close to was Lu Bian, not Lu Xie. As long as Lu Xie took the throne, Zhongli, who was close to Lu Bian, would definitely be killed. Rather than die a little later, it was better to display his valiant side in front of Lu Hong. This way, if the situation took a turn for the better, he, Zhongli, would be able to obtain even more favor. If the situation didn't take a turn for the better and he was ultimately killed by Lu Xie, then Zhongli would be able to obtain a good reputation. When Lu Xie heard this, his eyes narrowed and he coldly said, "Damned eunuch, I'll deal with you later. Right now, I still have important matters to attend to. Once I'm done, I'll throw you into a pigsty and get some boars in heat. At that time, you'll know what it means to be a eunuch as a woman." When Zhongli heard this, his expression immediately changed and he harshly roared, "Lu Xie! His Majesty is your biological father. Aren't you afraid of being struck by lightning if you dare to kill your own father?" When Lu Xie heard this, he sneered coldly. Then, he looked at Lu Hong and said with a smile, "Father, if you obey, you can avoid physical pain. If you refuse, I can't guarantee how many cuts you can take. TSK, 1,000 cut. That flesh, piece by piece, dripping with blood. Father, don't you think that scene is very exciting?" You. As Lu Hong listened to Lu Xie's description, his body trembled more and more violently, and his face turned paler and paler. When Lu Xie heard this, he smiled playfully and gestured with his dagger. "Where should I start? Arms? Legs? Or was it her stomach? TSK, I can't wait. Lu Xie, how dare you?" After hearing this, Zhongli, who was lying on the ground, had a change in expression. He then yelled at Lu Xie, "Father, you really won't agree?" Lu Xie ignored Zhongli and looked directly at the terrified Lu Hong. He asked with a smile as he waved the dagger that emitted a cold and sharp light, "Little bastard, you won't get away with it." When Lu Hong heard Lu Xie's threat, his already pale face turned even paler. He then gritted his teeth and said to Lu Xie. When Lu Xie heard this, his eyes narrowed. The dagger in his hand instantly pierced towards Lu Hong's right leg. "No!" Seeing this scene, Zhongli immediately screamed, "Lu Xie!" When Lu Hong, who was sitting on the dragon throne, saw that Lu Xie was really going to make a move, he immediately roared with anger. At this moment, a gust of wind suddenly blew in the palace hall. Then, a strong and powerful hand instantly grabbed Lu Xie's right hand that was holding the dagger. Crack! A sound was heard. Lu Xie's right hand, which was holding the dagger, was instantly crushed into dough. In the next second, a mournful howl sounded from Lu Xie's mouth. Ow! When Lu Hong realized that he had been saved, he immediately let out a sigh of relief. Then, he looked at the man who had suddenly appeared and was stunned. At this moment, Zhongli, who was sitting paralyzed in the palace hall, and Lu Xie, who was howling miserably, were also stunned. In the next second, shouts of shock, anger, and ecstasy sounded. Yi Chen. The person who had come was the great Han Empire's general of agile cavalry, Yi Chen. In fact, Yi Chen had almost been teleported into the palace hall. However, Yi Chen had temporarily stopped the teleportation and entered the palace through the palace gate instead. Because Lu Hong was here, Yi Chen didn't want Lu Hong to see that he had the ability to teleport. Otherwise, Lu Hong would definitely be alarmed and begin to suspect Yi Chen. Of course, this wasn't the key. The key was that the moment Yi Chen's consciousness appeared in the palace, he discovered that there were two souls in the body of the great Han Empire's second prince, Lu Xie. To be precise, the real Lu Xie wasn't dead. His soul was still there, but it was being controlled by Li Mubai's soul. Realizing this, Yi Chen immediately gave up on the idea of capturing Lu Xie, or rather, capturing Li Mubai, who was occupying Lu Xie's body, and killing him. This was because it was better for Lu Xie to not die. Otherwise, the Great Dong Rebellion and the struggle for hegemony would be affected. If the trajectory of history really developed in an uncontrollable direction because of Lu Xie's death, then Yi Chen would very likely have to mobilize his troops in advance and lose a lot of heaven and earth's fortune. This was not the result that Yi Chen wanted to see. Thus, Yi Chen changed his plan at the last minute. He would enter the palace from the entrance and save Lu Hong, putting on a show of a loyal subject protecting the emperor. As for Li Mubai and Lu Xie's body, Yi Chen would definitely kill him. There was no doubt about this. After all, Li Mubai had devised a series of vicious schemes against Yi Chen, and after discovering that something was wrong, he immediately began to kill the emperor and usurp the throne. When Yi Chen heard Lu Hong, Lu Xie, and Zhang Li's cries, he couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. Then he bowed to Lu Hong and said, "This emperor has arrived late. Your humble subject asks for your majesty's forgiveness for being late." "Good, good. The heavens haven't forsaken us, ha ha." When Lu Hong heard this, the fear in his heart that had reached its peak instantly disappeared without a trace. He then raised his head to the sky and laughed wildly. At this moment, Zhang Li, who was sitting paralyzed in the hall, also excitedly shouted at Lu Hong, your Majesty is right. With Lord Yu of Beech here, all trifles will be swept away. Congratulations, Your Majesty! Congratulations, Your Majesty!" Ha ha ha, Father Rang was right. With our good son-in-law here, our world will be as stable as Mount Tai. When Lu Hong heard this, he immediately shouted in excitement. After Lu Hong finished shouting, he looked at Lu Xie, whose right hand had been crushed, and sternly shouted, "Little bastard, we will put you to death by 1,000 cuts." Lu Xie, whose right hand had been crushed by Yi Chen, coldly glanced at Lu Hong, then looked at Yi Chen and sternly shouted, "Yi Chen, you ruined my plans. I swear that I won't let you off," Lu Xie coldly said. After saying this, a ball of black qi instantly flew out of Lu Xie's body and out of the palace hall. Chapter 647. Following the appearance of the black smoke, the small body of the great Han Empire's second prince, Lu Xie, fell to the ground with a thud. When the furious Lu Hong saw this, he couldn't help but be stunned. Then, he shouted in shock, "Evil spirit! Evil spirit! It is the evil spirit's doing. Your Majesty, your humble servant will immediately pursue and kill this evil spirit to prevent it from wreaking havoc in the imperial palace and harming your Majesty." When Yi Chen heard this, he smiled inwardly. Then, he bowed solemnly to Lu Hong. Evil spirit was nonsense. The black smoke was Li Mubai's soul. However, Li Mubai was a player, so Yi Chen couldn't reveal Li Mubai's identity. Otherwise, Lu Hong might lose his mind and issue imperial edicts that were detrimental to the players. For example, prohibiting players from approaching major cities, having the experience gained from killing monsters, having the drop rate, having the agricultural output, etc. This way, the players would definitely be unlucky. Of course, Yi Chen didn't care if the players were unlucky. Yi Chen only cared about himself. Although Yi Chen was Yu of Beech and the great Han Empire's cavalry general, Yi Chen was also a player. If the players were unlucky because of Lu Hong's anger, Yi Chen would definitely be restricted like the other players. This wasn't a situation that Yi Chen wanted to see. And now, Lu Hong had defined Li Mubai's soul as an evil spirit. Yi Chen naturally wouldn't be foolish enough to reveal Li Mubai's identity as a player. Yi Chen, no matter what, you have to crush this evil spirit's bones and scatter his ashes. Otherwise, I won't be able to eat or sleep in peace. When Lu Hong heard Yi Chen's affirmative words, his face instantly paled. He then hurriedly looked at Yi Chen and shouted loudly. When Yi Chen heard this, he nodded heavily and then bowed. Yes, Your Majesty. When Zhongli, who was still paralyzed in the hall, saw this, he quickly looked at Yi Chen and shouted, Lord Underworld King, there are still accomplices of the evil spirit outside the hall. Yi Chen's intention was obviously to pursue the evil spirit immediately. If this were any other time, Zhongli would naturally say some flattering words, but it was different now. The evil spirit that had taken over Lu Xie's body had planted many superhumans outside the imperial palace. If Yi Chen did not care about anything and just left, it would really be a disaster. Yes. Yi Chen, hurry. Hurry and kill those traitors outside for me. Before Yi Chen could speak, Lu Hong, who was sitting on the dragon throne, suddenly shivered and hastily called out. When Yi Chen heard this, he smiled faintly and said, Yes, Your Majesty. In fact, even if Lu Hong did not say that he would kill the players outside the imperial palace, Yi Chen would still do it. After all, if Yi Chen really left, the powerless Lu Hong and Zhang Li would not be able to deal with the players. This way, Lu Hong would most likely be killed by the players controlled by Li Mubai. After all, the people hidden outside the palace were all players. If they discovered that Li Mubai had failed, they would definitely not sit still and wait for their death. There was only one most likely choice for them, which was to kill Lu Hong and rob the imperial palace. At this time, Lu Hong could not die. Zhang Li could not die either. Otherwise, the trajectory of history would definitely change. This was not an outcome that Yi Chen wanted to see. As for why Yi Chen did not attack the players when he arrived at the imperial palace, it was also because Yi Chen was too fast. To be more precise, when Yi Chen entered the imperial palace through the gates and ran to the imperial palace, no one saw Yi Chen's figure. Otherwise, Yi Chen would have fought with the players controlled by Li Mubai before he even entered the imperial palace. The result of the fight would be that Li Mubai would be alerted. After that, Li Mubai would definitely kidnap Lu Hong. Yi Chen did not want to see such an outcome happen. Therefore, Yi Chen directly rushed into the imperial palace and protected Lu Hong. After Yi Chen finished speaking, he waved his right hand and the thick black godslayer instantly appeared in his right hand. In the next second, Yi Chen's feet moved and he directly rushed into the imperial palace. In a few breaths, a series of exclamations could be heard. Yi Chen! It's Yi Chen! Quick! Report to the boss! Report my ass! Run! After a cacophony of screams and shouts, the dense sound of bodies being pierced could be heard. Poochie, poochie, after the time it took to brew a cup of tea, a series of explosions could be heard. Bang, bang, bang outside the imperial palace. The players disguised as imperial guards and eunuchs who were hiding in every corner of the imperial palace exploded without exception. Their bodies then exploded everywhere. Looking at the broken limbs all over the ground, Yi Chen curled his lips in disdain. He then put away the Godslayer and moved his feet, directly arriving at the imperial palace's imperial palace. When Lu Hong saw that Yi Chen had returned so quickly, he could not help but be surprised. He then asked, "Is it all settled, Yi Chen?" When Yi Chen heard this, he nodded and then bowed. "Your Majesty, I have killed all the disguised spies outside the imperial palace." "Congratulations, Your Majesty!" "Congratulations, your Majesty! Lord Yu of Beech's bravery is unparalleled in both ancient and modern times. For your Majesty to have Lord Yu of Beech as your son-in-law is truly worthy of celebration." When Zhongli, who had collapsed in the imperial palace, heard this, his eyes suddenly lit up. He then shouted at Lu Hong. When Lu Hong heard this, the shock in his heart was instantly replaced by joy. He then looked at Yi Chen with a face full of smiles and said, "Your Majesty has protected you. Your bravery is unparalleled under the heavens, and you must be rewarded. I'll confer." When Lu Hong said this, he suddenly froze. It turned out that Lu Hong did not know what position to confer on Yi Chen. When Zhongli saw this, he secretly glanced at Yi Chen, then looked at Lu Hong and said, "Your Majesty, if the great Han Empire has you of Beech's protection, it will definitely flourish for a long time, and your Majesty will also become an emperor for all eternity. In this servant's opinion, how about I bestow upon you of Beech the Xianyuan sword to be in charge of the punishment of the great Han Empire? If there is a rebellion, no matter who the rebels are, you of Beech can directly send troops to quell the rebellion." When Yi Chen heard this, his eyes suddenly widened. The Xianyuan sword, holy shit! What's going on? Why is there a Xianyuan sword in the Three Kingdoms beginners area? The Xianyuan sword was a legendary divine weapon. Although there were many opinions on its origins, it was undeniable that the Xianyuan sword's power was not small. However, in Yi Chen's previous life, the Xianyuan sword only existed in legends and had never appeared before. But now, Zhongli actually mentioned the Xianyuan sword, and even said that he wanted Lu Hong to bestow the Xianyuan sword to Yi Chen. How could Yi Chen not be shocked? Just as Yi Chen thought this, Lu Hong, who had been silent for a moment after hearing Zhang Li's suggestion, suddenly gritted his teeth and shouted, "My worthy son-in-law, come forward and receive the decree." When Yi Chen heard this, he immediately gathered his thoughts and stepped forward, bowing and said, "Your humble servant is here." Lu Hong glanced at Yi Chen and shouted, "Brother Yi, don't worry. In recent years, countless evil thieves have spied on the great Han Empire. This year, the great Han Empire was once again invaded by evil spirits who wanted to overthrow the orthodoxy of the human race. Fortunately, the great general of agile cavalry, Yi Chen, turned the tide and stabilized my empire. There is an ancient saying that rewards are given for meritorious deeds and punishments for wrongdoings. Today, my worthy son-in-law has saved me from danger, so I must reward him. Therefore, I bestow the Xianyuan sword to my worthy son-in-law to show the world. Henceforth, my worthy son-in-law will patrol the world on my behalf and kill all those who disobey me. Eliminate all evil spirits in the world." Chapter 648. Thank you for your grace, Your Majesty. This humble subject will definitely exterminate all the rebels and traitors in the world for Your Majesty, and slay all the demons and monsters. When Yi Chen heard this, his eyes suddenly brightened, and then he bowed and said with a sonorous sound. Lu Hong nodded in satisfaction when he heard this. Then, he moved his mind. In the next second, a large golden sword suddenly appeared in front of Lu Hong. Yi Chen's eyes lit up when he saw the large golden sword. Damn it, this should be the legendary godly weapon, the Xianyuan sword. Don't make me happy for nothing, however, even if it isn't, I've still profited greatly this time. Previously, because of the rebellion, Lu Hong gave me the authority to deploy troops at will. Now, he's giving me the authority to target all the rebels and traitors in the world at will. When the War of the Vassals starts, damn it, whoever I say is a rebel or a traitor will be. Moreover, I have a good reason to deploy troops. It's much more awesome than holding the emperor to order the vassals. When Yi Chen thought of this, Lu Hong, who was sitting on the dragon throne, looked at the large golden sword with some reluctance. Then, he looked at Yi Chen and said with a smile, "Son-in-law, aren't you going to take the sword?" "Yes, Your Majesty." When Yi Chen heard this, he nodded with a serious expression. Then, He stepped forward and took the large golden sword with both hands. At this moment, the system notification sounded. Ding! Congratulations to player Yi Chen for obtaining the ancient godly weapon, the Xianyuan sword. When the system notification ended, Yi Chen's hanging heart immediately relaxed. Damn it, it really is the Xianyuan sword. Just as Yi Chen thought of this, the world notification sounded. Ding! Congratulations to player Yi Chen for obtaining the ancient godly weapon, the Xianyuan sword. The special conditions have been met. The godly weapons in all major game regions have been automatically unsealed. The world notification sounded 3 times in a row, causing the entire world channel to explode. Damn it! Damn it! What's going on? Yi Chen's auction just ended and he obtained the Xianyuan sword? Motherf asterisk cur. Can someone explain to me why? Could it be that Yi Chen being able to obtain the Xianyuan sword has something to do with the Dao Enlightenment Stone and the Two Realm Stone? What does that have to do with anything? In any case, I don't believe it. Even if I did, I would only believe one thing. Yi Chen is fucking cheating again. Damn, it's not fair. Why does Yi Chen get all the good stuff? It's the Xianyuan sword. Damn, it's the legendary weapon of the Yellow Emperor. It's very powerful. Jealous? Jealous? It's Yi Chen who has the Xianyuan sword. Don't tell me you dare to snatch it from him? F***CKU. So what if I'm envious? That's a legendary divine weapon, who wouldn't be envious? I'm not envious because I know that Yi Chen is a pervert. There's no point in being envious. You trash, why don't you look at the key points of the world announcement? What's the point of talking to this group of scum with extremely poor eyesight? Don't say anything. Damn, do you really think I can't tell? The divine weapons in the various gaming regions have been unsealed. Doesn't that mean that there will be divine weapons in other regions? In addition, the World War will start in 7 days. Isn't this obvious? Does it mean that divine weapons will drop? Damn, that's good. I don't dare to drop Yi Chen's divine weapons, but I can drop the divine weapons of other countries. That's right. There's only one pervert. The players of other countries are not as perverted as Yi Chen. When the time comes, I'll go to other countries to drop divine weapons for fun. Hee, count me in. My target is Japan. I'll drop their tens. Oh god. Damn. Should I drop the back or the front? Both. The world announcement was abuzz with activity. Yi Chen looked at it and curled his lips in disdain. The divine weapons will definitely drop when they are unsealed. That's true. But damn, it's mine. After Yi Chen finished his thought, the sound of hurried footsteps could be heard. At the same time, the sound of escort could be heard. After a few breaths, a large number of palace guards, eunuchs, and imperial physicians rushed toward the palace hall. When they saw the scene in the palace hall, they were all stunned. In the next second, exclamations could be heard. How is that possible? Did the general of Agile Cavalry betray us? Impossible. Impossible. The general of Agile Cavalry is going to marry the 2 princesses. How could he betray us? It was no wonder that the imperial guards were so shocked. When they heard the strange sound, they hurriedly ran over to check. Who would have thought that they would see a bloody scene? The ground was full of broken limbs, pieces of flesh, internal organs, and intestines were all over the place. At that moment they were scared out of their wits. Lu Hong was in the palace hall. If something happened to Lu Hong, there would only be one ending for these palace guards, and that would be the extermination of all 9 generations. No matter men or women, old or young, even the cats, dogs, or mice in the family, they would all be killed. Even the bones of their ancestors who had been buried would be dug out, whipped, and exposed to the sun. After all, Lu Hong, the emperor of the Great Han Empire, was killed. When they rushed to the palace hall, they happened to see Yi Chen, who was holding the Xianyuan sword and was only a few steps away from Lu Hong. It would be strange if they didn't think that it was Yi Chen who made the bloody scene outside the palace hall. While the royal guards were still in shock, Zhang Li shouted at the royal guards, "Don't worry. Shut up. A group of good-for-nothings. If it weren't for you Lord Beach, His Majesty would have been killed." As soon as Zhang Li's words fell, the palace guards were stunned. Then, they immediately understood what Zhang Li meant. After glancing at Yi Chen in a daze, they hurriedly knelt on the ground, and then bowed to Lu Hong in fear. "We came too late to save His Majesty. Please punish us, Your Majesty." "Shut up. A group of trash. You can't protect our safety and even frame our son-in-law. What's the point of us raising you? Men, drag them all out and put them to death." Hearing this, Lu Hong's face immediately turned angry and he roared loudly. When Yi Chen heard this, he couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. Then, he bowed to Lu Hong and said, "Your Majesty, although this humble subject has only entered the palace a few times, I can see one thing. The palace guards are all elites and loyal. What happened today was caused by an evil spirit. If the evil spirit hadn't taken over the second prince's body, none of this would have happened. Your Majesty, please show mercy." When Yi Chen's words fell, the palace guards felt a warmth in their hearts. Then, they looked at Yi Chen with incomparable gratitude. However, the furious Lu Hong was slightly stunned. Then, he snorted at the palace guards and shouted, "If it weren't for our son-in-law pleading for you all, our 9 generations would have been executed." When the palace guards heard this, they all breathed a sigh of relief. Then, they hurriedly bowed to Lu Hong and said, "Thank you, Your Majesty, for sparing our lives." When Zhang Li, who had collapsed in the hall, saw this, he immediately shouted at the imperial physicians who had come with the palace guards, "What are you doing? What are you waiting for? Hurry up and cure His Majesty." Chapter 649. Zhang Li and Lu Hong had both been poisoned by Li Mubai. If Zhang Li hadn't confirmed that the poison was only used to numb the body, Zhang Li wouldn't have been in the mood to question the imperial guards. Of course, this wasn't important. What was important was that Zhang Li knew how to seize every opportunity to express his loyalty and concern. Otherwise, Lu Hong wouldn't have valued Lu Hong so much, to the point of relying on him. Following Zhang Li's words, the imperial physicians hurried forward to treat Lu Hong. Not long after, the imperial physicians removed the poison from Lu Hong's body, and Zhang Li, who had collapsed in the hall, was also treated by the imperial physicians. When Yi Chen saw this, he immediately bowed to Lu Hong. "Your Majesty, this lowly subject needs to immediately pursue the evil spirit. Otherwise, if we delay too long, the evil spirit will escape without a trace, and we won't be able to catch it." Lu Hong had just been detoxifying the poison, so Yi Chen naturally couldn't leave immediately. Now that Lu Hong's poison had been removed, Yi Chen naturally didn't want to continue wasting time here. Lu Hong, who had just recovered some of his strength, opened his eyes wide when he heard this. He then looked at Yi Chen and sternly shouted, "Worthy son-in-law, we must exterminate this evil spirit." When Yi Chen heard the anger and killing intent in Lu Hong's voice, he nodded heavily and bowed. "Yes, Your Majesty. This lowly subject will set out immediately. We will definitely exterminate this evil spirit." "Good." Lu Hong nodded in satisfaction and shouted. When Yi Chen heard this, he immediately turned and left the hall, quickly heading for the Imperial Palace gates. Imperial Palace Great Hall. As Lu Hong watched Yi Chen leave, he suddenly thought of something and his expression changed. A second later, Lu Hong looked at Zhang Li and asked, "Father Rang, how did Yi Chen arrive in such a timely manner?" "Your Majesty." Zhang Li was stunned when he heard this. Then, his expression changed. Zhang Li naturally understood the meaning behind Lu Hong's words. It was precisely because he understood that Zhang Li, who regarded Yi Chen as one of his own, suddenly had an ugly expression on his face. The reason was simple. Lu Xie had been possessed by an evil spirit and forced Lu Hong to abdicate his throne. He had even almost killed Lu Hong. As for Yi Chen, he had not been summoned, but he had arrived at the palace at the most crucial moment and saved Lu Hong. All of this was too much of a coincidence, so much so that even Zhang Li began to wonder if all of this was done intentionally by Yi Chen. Or perhaps Yi Chen had purposely set this up to scheme against Lu Hong and even Zhang Li. Zhang Li felt uncomfortable when he thought of Lu Xie's true colors. At this moment, a young eunuch hastily ran to the entrance of the hall and made a few gestures at Zhang Li. Zhang Li, who had been thinking about how to respond to Lu Hong, was stunned when he saw these gestures. Then, he let out a long breath. A second later, Zhang Li looked at Lu Hong and bowed. "Your Majesty, this servant sensed that there were people in the palace who secretly left under Second Prince Lu Xie's orders. I sent people out to investigate, and they have already returned." Could the evil spirit really be related to Yi Chen? Lu Hong's expression darkened when he heard this. Zhang Li hastily bowed and said, "Reporting to Your Majesty, Lord Yu of Beech has always been loyal to Your Majesty. As for the results of the investigation, this servant does not know. However, this servant is willing to use my head to guarantee that Lord Yu of Beech is definitely not an accomplice of the evil spirit." Hearing this, Lu Hong was slightly taken aback. However, Lu Hong's suspended heart instantly relaxed a lot. After coming back to his senses, Lu Hong nodded, then looked at Zhang Li and opened his mouth to speak. "Come in and tell us everything." "Yes, Your Majesty. Your Majesty." Zhang Li nodded his head and bowed. After saying this, Zhang Li waved his hand at the entrance of the hall. A second later, a young eunuch hastily entered the hall and then bowed to Lu Hong. "Greetings, Your Majesty." When Lu Hong heard this, he looked at the young eunuch and coldly said, "Tell us the results of your investigation. You are not allowed to hide anything. Otherwise, us will execute you with 1,000 cuts." When the young eunuch heard this, he suddenly shivered and hastily bowed. "Yes, Your Majesty." After the young eunuch finished speaking, he hastily began to narrate. When the young eunuch finished, Lu Hong let out a long sigh and then looked at the young eunuch and asked, "So, our good son-in-law was exposed by a fake imperial edict by a eunuch in the palace and was almost poisoned to death. Reporting to Your Majesty." This servant investigated both openly and secretly and obtained this result. When the young eunuch heard this, he hastily bowed and said. When Lu Hong heard this, he nodded in satisfaction. He then looked at Zhang Li and sighed. "Father Rang, us misunderstood our good son-in-law." Sigh. When Zhang Li heard this, he smiled flatteringly and bowed. "Your Majesty, this is not a misunderstanding. I can only say that all of this is too much of a coincidence. However, it is also thanks to this coincidence. Otherwise, Yu of Beech would not have sensed that something was wrong and immediately entered the palace to save Your Majesty." When Lu Hong heard this, he immediately smiled and stroked his beard. "Father Rang, you are right. Now, us have a feeling that our good son-in-law is a heavenly soldier specially sent by the heavens to protect us and our country." When Zhang Li heard this, he immediately beamed and bowed. "Congratulations, Your Majesty! Congratulations, Your Majesty! To have Yu of Beech as a son-in-law, the great Han Empire will be as stable as Mount Tai and will prosper forever. Good! Ha ha!" When Lu Hong heard this, he laughed and shouted. At the entrance of the palace, after Yi Chen left the palace, he walked a few steps to a secluded corner and moved his mind. In the next second, the space in front of Yi Chen suddenly distorted. After glancing at the distorted space, Yi Chen stepped into it and disappeared. Luoyang, 300 miles south of the city, at the foot of a mountain. A group of fully equipped players were discussing something with worried looks on their faces. "Damn it, why are we so unlucky? When will these damn days end? Sigh, if only we could get the antidote. That way we wouldn't be controlled by others. Where can we get the antidote? The poison we are poisoned with is from the real world. If we want to detoxify it, we have to detoxify it in the real world. I don't understand why he wants to control us. We are not strong enough to help him at all. Do you know what dogs are used for? In his eyes, we are just dogs. F***ck. I just want to detoxify the poison and kill that bastard. Don't talk nonsense. Have you thought about why he wants us to stay here and not let us go near the cave? How would I know? Do you dare to go over and take a look? If he knows about this, we can only wait for the poison to take effect. Just as the group of players were talking, a cloud of black smoke flew over and headed straight for the cave halfway up the mountain. Seeing this, the players were stunned. At this moment, outside the cave halfway up the mountain, the space suddenly distorted. In the next second, Yi Chun stepped out and appeared here. Chapter 650. At the foot of the mountain, the players who were shocked by the sudden appearance of the black smoke were stunned when they saw Yi Chun. In the next second, the players at the foot of the mountain widened their eyes in unison and shouted in shock. Yi Chun! Yi Chun ignored the cries of the players at the foot of the mountain and looked directly at the black smoke that was flying rapidly towards the cave. In the next second, Yi Chun smiled coldly and said, "You're the one who made the decision. Li Mubai, hand over your sword control technique." Yi Chun's goal in chasing Li Mubai was to kill Li Mubai. After all, Li Mubai had schemed against Yi Chun. As for Li Mubai handing over the sword control technique, it was because the sword control technique was Li Mubai's specialty, and it was quite powerful. Rather than letting the sword control technique be lost, it was better to obtain it. Yi Chun had been obsessed with the sword control technique in his previous life. After all, the sword control technique was very cool when used. Of course, it was also very powerful. Otherwise, Yi Chun wouldn't have had the idea of obtaining the sword control technique in his previous life. Unfortunately, Yi Chun was cannon fodder in his previous life. He didn't have the chance or the ability to obtain it. Of course, this wasn't important. The important thing was that Yi Chun didn't feel guilty about robbing Li Mubai of his sword control technique. As for whether the sword control technique would be of any help to Yi Chun didn't care much about it. After all, the 9 Revolutions mystic art and the Divine Night lightning controlling technique were much more powerful than the sword control technique. Yi Chun wouldn't lose the big picture just because the sword control technique was his obsession in his previous life. However, this didn't stop Yi Chun from robbing Li Mubai. As soon as Yi Chun finished speaking, the black smoke stopped and shouted coldly at Yi Chun. "Yi Chun, leave some leeway for others in the future. Leave some leeway." Yi Chun smiled coldly and asked, "When you were scheming against me, why didn't you think of leaving a way out? Yi Chun, are you sure you want to be my enemy?" Li Mubai's cold voice rang out once more. When Yi Chun heard this, he narrowed his eyes and said, "It seems that you are very confident. I have always been very confident. Also, let me tell you something. Don't think that just because you have reached the God Martial Realm, you are invincible. Otherwise, you will suffer greatly." Li Mubai groaned and then said. When Yi Chun heard this, he couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. "Do you belong to the 7-star Tower, Blue Moon Pavilion, Limitless Palace, or other forces that have given up on hiding? No, there should be forces that are hiding and not coming out. Nangong aristocratic family? Gongsun family? Or which one?" When the black smoke in the sky heard this, it immediately surged. Then, Li Mubai's cold voice sounded again. "Who are you?" Clearly, Yi Chun had hit the nail on the head. Otherwise, Li Mubai wouldn't have been so flustered. When Yi Chun heard this, he laughed and then said, "It doesn't matter who you are. Who I am isn't important. What's important is that I know your background. Oh right, I forgot to tell you. Originally, I didn't plan to make a move on you. Who knows what secrets you have. But because of you, I will make an exception." "Make an exception? Very good, you can make an exception. I am really looking forward to the scene of your head bleeding and dying on the spot after you make an exception." When Li Mubai heard this, he suddenly laughed wildly. When Yi Chun heard this, He looked thoughtfully at Li Mubai, who was in the soul state in the sky, and then said, "Your plan is really shrewd. Your scheming is indeed impressive. If it were someone else, they might really be fearful." Unfortunately, when Yi Chen said this, his eyes turned cold, and then he continued. "No matter what your purpose is, no matter what your plan is, no matter whether you are a member of those forces or not, I have no interest in knowing. To me, you are just an ant. All your plans are just a joke in front of me. I will let you understand what it means to be domineering, what it means to be an emperor." When Yi Chen finished speaking, he raised his right hand and made a grabbing motion. In the next second, Li Mubai's soul was caught in Yi Chen's hand. After the black smoke was caught by Yi Chen, it kept struggling, but no matter how hard it struggled, it couldn't break free from Yi Chen's right hand. Li Mubai, who was aware of this, was immediately enraged and then roared, "You really dare to make a move against me? Even on the brink of death, you're still thinking about scheming. Li Mubai, you know far too little about me. Even if what you're saying is true, as far as I'm concerned, it's nothing more than a joke." With that, Yi Chen waved his left hand, and the pitch-black god-slaying spear appeared. In the next second, Yi Chen's left hand moved and the godslayer's tip pierced into the black smoke. A horrified, shrill cry of agony instantly rang out. No. Li Mubai didn't expect that Yi Chen really didn't have any scruples. He didn't ask for his secret, didn't ask for the sword-controlling technique from him, and simply made a move. "I will give you the sword-controlling technique. No, I will give you the Green Lotus sword technique. Let me go this time." Li Mubai, who came back to his senses, hurriedly shouted. When Yi Chen heard this, he looked at Li Mubai's soul expressionlessly and said, "From the moment you started to scheme against me, your ending was already decided. No. Let me go. Let me go. I will give you a peerless cultivation technique, and share a great secret with you. Let me go." When Li Mubai heard this, an indescribable sense of fear suddenly appeared in his heart, and then he screamed at Yi Chen. When Yi Chen heard this, he curled his lips in disdain and said, "I have the idea of finding out the secret, and I also want to get enough benefits. But you have angered me." When Yi Chen said this, the Godslayer suddenly shook. After a buzz sound, an even stronger suction force suddenly appeared and swallowed Li Mubai's soul. At this moment, a green lotus suddenly fell from the sky. When Yi Chen saw this, he used his right hand and the green lotus flew towards Yi Chen. Then Yi Chen caught it in his hand. Ding! Congratulations to player Yi Chen for obtaining the Chaos Level Cultivation Technique, Green Lotus Sword Technique. When the system's notification ended, Yi Chen couldn't help but be stunned. What the hell? The Green Lotus Sword Technique was actually a Chaos Level Cultivation Technique. When Yi Chen attacked Li Mubai mentioned the Green Lotus Sword Technique. Although Yi Chen didn't know the specific level of the Green Lotus Sword Technique, he didn't think that it was a Chaos Level Cultivation Technique. Who would have thought that the result would give Yi Chen a big surprise? Li Mubai, this idiot, even if he didn't scheme against Laozi, with this Green Lotus Sword spell, his achievements in the future would definitely not be too low. But now, the Green Lotus Sword Technique belongs to me. Chapter 651. Thinking of this, Yi Chen couldn't help but smirk. With a thought, a drop of essence blood flew out from his finger and landed on the green lotus. The moment Yi Chen's essence blood touched the green lotus, a bloody light shone brightly. The green lotus, which was still a flower bud, suddenly bloomed and released a bright light. At this moment, countless cyan-colored runes filled with a profound aura suddenly rose from the cyan-colored lotus. After that, they spiraled towards Yi Chen's forehead. As soon as they came into contact with Yi Chen's forehead, they directly broke into Yi Chen's Zifu. As the runes entered Yi Chen's purple palace, the green lotus in Yi Chen's hand started to fade. When the last rune entered Yi Chen's purple palace, the green lotus in Yi Chen's hand completely disappeared. At the same time, a mysterious aura suddenly exploded from Yi Chen's body. And in Yi Chen's purple palace, a slowly spinning green lotus appeared out of thin air. Yi Chen, who had been observing this process with his consciousness, suddenly frowned. Where was the information about the green lotus sword technique? Yi Chen used the green lotus sword technique, but what Yi Chen couldn't understand was that he didn't receive any information about the green lotus sword technique. Just as Yi Chen was puzzled, a system notification sounded out. Ding! The green lotus sword technique trial has begun. Within 2 hours, if player Yi Chen understands the green lotus sword technique to 100%, he will successfully grasp the green lotus sword technique. If he fails, he will automatically receive a sword technique of the same level. If he can't comprehend it, the green lotus sword technique will automatically disappear. As soon as the system notification ended, Yi Chen's face froze. Damn, I was wondering why I didn't receive any information about the green lotus sword technique. So I have to go through a trial. It seemed that Li Mubai, who had the chaos-level green lotus sword technique in his previous life, couldn't become a super expert because of this trial. Thinking of this, Yi Chen waved his right hand and 120 enlightenment stones appeared in front of Yi Chen. Looking at the 120 Tao comprehension stones, Yi Chen directly chose to use them. Ding! Congratulations to player Yi Chen for using the enlightenment stone. Enlightenment mode activated. Duration, 120 minutes. As soon as the system's notification ended, Yi Chen directly entered the Tao comprehension mode. Then, he began to comprehend the green lotus formed by the green runes in his Zifu. Yi Chen stood where he was, trying to comprehend the green lotus sword spell. The players controlled by Li Mubai at the foot of the mountain were filled with fear. Many of them even began to despair. They had witnessed Yi Chen's arrival with their own eyes, and they had even heard Li Mubai's miserable howl before his death. At that moment they were terrified because Li Mubai had poisoned them. Without Li Mubai, how could they cure the poison in their bodies? The thought that they would die from the poison soon made them shudder. Many of them even went offline to check if Li Mubai was still alive. However, the result was what they didn't want to see the most. Li Mubai was dead. He was completely dead. Moreover, they couldn't find the antidote from Li Mubai's corpse in the real world. Not long after, a middle-aged fatty roared with a pale face. What do we do? What do we do? Li Mubai was killed by Yi Chen. How can we cure the poison? Without Li Mubai, we can't cure the poison. When the time comes, our intestines will definitely rot and we will die. One of them said with a face full of unwillingness. Hurry up and think of a way. We can't just wait to die, right? One of them said anxiously. It's all because of that son of a bitch Li Mubai. If he didn't poison us, we wouldn't have to be so afraid. One of them gritted his teeth and said, Damn it. Li Mubai is the main culprit, but Yi Chen is also the key. Think about it. If Yi Chen didn't kill Li Mubai, how could we not have the antidote? One of them suddenly thought of something and looked hatefully at Yi Chen, who was halfway up the mountain, as he roared with a face full of madness. That's right, it's Yi Chen. Let's go find him. If he wants to kill Li Mubai, we don't care. But he can't just ignore our lives because of Li Mubai. We didn't do anything to offend him. When one of them heard this, his eyes suddenly lit up. But, Yi Chen is very domineering. What if he directly attacks us? Don't forget. If he kills people in the game, he will die in the real world, one of them stuttered. If we find him, we can still live. If we don't find him, we can only wait for death. It's up to you what to choose. Anyway, I'm going to find him now. No matter what, we will die from the poison because of Yi Chen. Without him, we wouldn't have to face this problem. Yes. Let's find him. Let's go. The gamers at the foot of the mountain quickly came to a consensus. Then, they walked up the mountain in groups. Before long, the gamers at the foot of the mountain arrived at the waist of the mountain. When the gamers saw that Yi Chen's eyes were tightly shut and he wasn't moving, they were stunned. They couldn't tell what Yi Chen was doing. A middle-aged man carefully glanced at Yi Chen, then bowed to Yi Chen and said, "I'm sorry." Lord Beach, however, not only did Yi Chen not open his eyes, but he also didn't respond. When the middle-aged man realized this, he had a strange look in his eyes. In fact, it wasn't just him. The other gamers also had strange looks in their eyes. The gamers looked at each other and took out their weapons in unison. At this moment, all the gamers had the same thought. Kill Yi Chen. They naturally wanted to detoxify the poison, but they knew one thing. Even if they found Yi Chen, he might not be able to detoxify the poison in their bodies. After all, Yi Chen was too overbearing and unreasonable. Even if he had a way to detoxify the poison, he might not do it for them. However, if they killed Yi Chen, the outcome would be different. If Yi Chen had a way to detoxify the poison, they would definitely be able to detoxify the poison. If not, they could obtain the various treasures on Yi Chen's body, especially the black spear that could devour souls. As long as they obtained any of the treasures on Yi Chen's body, they could use it as payment for detoxifying the poison. They could attract everyone's attention and let others find a way to detoxify the poison for them. The gamers didn't think that the treasures wouldn't drop. Because they had done it many times, killing people to drop equipment did indeed drop, and the quantity was not small. Yi Chen had many more items on him than other gamers. Most importantly, the items on Yi Chen's body, even the trashiest items, were incomparable to other gamers. After a few breaths, a gamer raised his weapon and slashed viciously at Yi Chen. Seeing this, the other players no longer held back. Without hesitation, they all raised their weapons and slashed at Yi Chen. Chapter 652. What would be the result of slashing people randomly? Flesh and blood splattered in all directions. However, when the players' weapons landed on Yi Chen's body, there was a series of ding-ding-dang-dang sounds. Not only were the weapons of the players who attacked Yi Chen instantly bounced off, but they also shattered into countless pieces with a kacha sound. How is this possible? Just as the players cried out in shock, 12 streaks of white sword chi suddenly appeared around Yi Chen's body and shot towards the players attacking him in the blink of an eye. Poochie, 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 there was a series of sounds of the sword auras piercing through bodies. In an instant, more than 300 players were pierced through by the sword auras like candied haws. The expressions on their faces froze at that moment. Pain, excruciating pain instantly appeared in the hearts of all the players who were pierced by the sword auras. Their mouths instantly opened wide as they tried to vent the excruciating pain that was transmitted from their nerve. However, before they could even begin to howl, there was a series of sounds of bodies exploding. The 300 players who were pierced by the sword auras all exploded without exception. Then, pieces of flesh and blood splattered all over the sky. In an instant, the players who were not pierced by the sword auras all opened their mouths wide and their eyes wide. They never expected that Yi Chen, who was obviously restricted by some special status, would be able to instantly kill more than 300 players without making any move. This number didn't seem like a lot, but the bloody scene scared all the remaining players out of their wit. Run! Run! There was a sudden scream. Then, the remaining players turned around and ran without hesitation. At that moment, the remaining players' faces were filled with fear and deep regret. However, just as the players ran a few steps, there was a sudden burst of air-piercing sounds. Chi, hundreds of sword auras suddenly appeared from Yi Chen's body and rapidly shot towards the escaping players. In an instant, there was a series of sounds of bodies being pierced. Poochie, 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 the bodies of the frantically fleeing players froze as the sword aura passed through them. Then, one by one, their bodies began to explode. Bang, bang, bang. Along with the dense sound of bodies exploding, the sky halfway up the mountain was instantly filled with pieces of flesh and blood. After a breath's time, a series of collisions could be heard. Countless pieces of flesh, wriggling organs, and severed limbs covered the ground in an instant. The entire mountain fell into silence. There were no loud shouts, no terrified screams, and no wails before death. Yi Chen, who was in the enlightenment mode, did not open his eyes. He was still comprehending the Green Lotus Sword arts. Everything that happened outside seemed to have nothing to do with Yi Chen. Time slowly ticked by. After 1 hour, Yi Chen opened his eyes. His gaze was filled with sword intent, and it disappeared in an instant. At this moment, the system notification sounded. Ding! Congratulations to player Yi Chen for successfully comprehending the Green Lotus Sword arts. After the system's notification ended, Yi Chen let out a long breath. Then, he looked halfway up the mountain and saw the ground covered with broken limbs. He smiled coldly. Who would have thought that the Green Lotus Sword aura of the Green Lotus Sword arts had the ability to destroy souls? When Yi Chen was in the enlightenment mode and comprehending the Green Lotus Sword arts, the players controlled by Li Mubai wanted to attack him. Yi Chen had actually sensed it. But Yi Chen couldn't just stop because Yi Chen wasn't sure if there was only one chance to comprehend the Green Lotus Sword arts. Even though the system notification said that he could fully comprehend the Green Lotus Sword arts in 2 hours, Yi Chen didn't want to mess around. Because if there was only one chance to comprehend the Green Lotus Sword arts, and Yi Chen had to stop to deal with those malicious players, then Yi Chen would lose the chance to learn the Green Lotus Sword arts. This wasn't the result Yi Chen wanted to see. After all, the Green Lotus Sword arts was a chaotic level technique. A chaotic level technique that could prove one's Tao and become a saint wasn't some cabbage that could be found on the street. Yi Chen wasn't interested in losing the chance to learn the Green Lotus Sword arts because of some ants. Of course, this was also because at this stage, no one could hurt Yi Chen. Otherwise, Yi Chen wouldn't be so careless. After all, if he lost his life, then no matter how many chaotic level techniques he had, it would be useless. Of course, this wasn't important. What was important was that Yi Chen had completely comprehended the Green Lotus Sword arts. Although he hadn't started cultivating it yet, he had already discovered how overpowered the Green Lotus Sword arts was. More accurately, it could wipe out souls, and it could be done with just a random sword aura. This Green Lotus Sword arts was fierce enough. Not bad. Thinking of this, Yi Chen couldn't help but smirk. He waved his right hand, and the golden Xianyuan sword appeared in Yi Chen's right hand instantly. Glancing at the mountain not far away, Yi Chen raised his right hand and chopped down with all his might. With a whang sound, a 10-meter-long golden sword aura appeared and quickly cut towards the mountain not far away. In the blink of an eye, the 10-meter-long sword aura expanded to 10,000 meters long and brutally cut into the mountain opposite. See la then, the top half of the mountain on the opposite side slowly slid down a slope. Walla, a large number of stones, rocks, and boulders followed the top half of the mountain and fell towards the mountain stream. 2 seconds after the top half of the mountain completely separated from the mountain and fell towards the mountain stream, a loud rumble suddenly sounded. Boom! The mountain shook and the ground shook. Yi Chen could not help raising his eyebrows as he watched the entire process of the mountain being sliced in half not far away. The power was not bad. Although it was supported by the Xianyuan sword, just a casual sword aura could reach such a level. It was indeed a bit overpowered. The Green Lotus Sword arts was a top-tier sword art. Who knew how long it would take for him to comprehend sword intent, sword soul, sword realm, and sword realm? No matter how long it would take, with the Green Lotus Sword arts, he would reach the peak of the sword art. Thinking of this, Yi Chen's eyes lit up and he moved his mind. In the next second, the space in front of Yi Chen suddenly distorted. Looking at the distorted space, Yi Chen stepped into it and disappeared. In an empty corner not far from the entrance of the palace, the space suddenly distorted. Then, Yi Chen took a step forward and appeared there. At this moment, a world announcement suddenly sounded. Ding! Player Luobatian has activated a first-rate historical general, Gan Ning. Subdue quest. Defeat Gan Ning within 2 hours. The winner will receive Gan Ning as his follower. Chapter 653. The announcement was repeated 3 times, and the entire world channel exploded. F***CK. What's going on? The League of Tyrants is going to recruit Gan Ning? What recruit? That's bullshit. Didn't you see the announcement? F***CK, that's a recruitment mission. Only by defeating Gan Ning can we recruit him. Recruit Gan Ning? Are you kidding me? Don't be fooled by the announcement. I can guarantee that it's impossible to defeat Gan Ning in 2 hours. F***CK. Don't forget Yi Chen is still there. Idiot, Yi Chen is in Luoyang. Where is Gan Ning? He's in Ba Prefecture. How can Yi Chen make it in time? Idiot, the Golden Turban Rebellion is over. The Shifter Invasion is over. Why can't he make it in time? Besides, don't forget that Yi Chen has the reincarnation Immortal City and can teleport. Do you think Yi Chen can't get there in 2 hours even without the teleportation portal? F***CK, stop wasting time. What's the point of talking about this? Don't you want to take the opportunity to make a fortune? Don't forget Gan Ning's identity now. He's a freaking pirate. Let's not talk about whether we can kill Gan Ning or not. We can even kill his subordinate. If he drops some battleship blueprints, we'll be rich. F***CK. Bro, you reminded me. F***CK, the World War is in 7 days. If we go to Japan or Korea, we can't play without a warship. The League of Tyrants invites all players to participate in Gan Ning's recruitment mission. As long as you're willing to participate, you'll receive 10,000 gold coins. If you succeed, you'll be rewarded handsomely. The 7-star tower invites all heroes to participate in Gan Ning's recruitment mission. No matter who you are, as long as you participate, you'll receive 50,000 gold coins. If you succeed, you'll receive 1,000,000 gold coins. The Wuji Palace invites all Xiantian realm experts to participate in Gan Ning's recruitment mission. As long as you're willing to participate, you'll receive 100,000 gold coins. If you succeed, you'll receive 1,000,000 gold coins. The top 10 contributors will receive 10,000,000 gold coins. F***CK. Were they all crazy? What kind of existence is this limitless palace and 7-star tower? I remember that they just appeared not long ago. Why are they so ruthless? Aren't they afraid that their efforts will be in vain? I find it strange too. If Gan Ning's mission was broadcasted in a regional announcement, it wouldn't be a big deal since Yi Chen wouldn't be able to hear it. But this is a global announcement. How could Yi Chen not hear it? Who cares about them? The opportunity to make money for free is right in front of you. Are you going? Of course I'm going. F***CK. How can I miss such a good opportunity? Damn it, I'm going too. The World Channel was in an uproar as it was flooded with messages. After Yi Chen took a look, he frowned. Yi Chen didn't care whether the players were interested in recruiting Gan Ning or not. No matter how many players came, Yi Chen didn't care. Even if it was the more famous League of Tyrants in his previous life, Yi Chen would not take it to heart. However, Yi Chen had to pay attention to the hidden forces in his previous life. It was impossible that they didn't know how powerful Yi Chen's god martial arts realm was. It was even more impossible that they didn't know that Yi Chen would participate in the mission after hearing the global announcement about Gan Ning's recruitment mission. Based on the way the hidden forces had expressed their goodwill to Yi Chen, they shouldn't be enemies with Yi Chen. But now, these hidden forces jumped out one by one and insisted on participating in the mission. It was obvious that they were determined to win. Of course, fighting over historical generals wasn't a big deal. Yi Chen wouldn't stop others from participating just because he wanted to recruit historical generals, nor would he be unhappy about it. After all, it was common sense to fight for what you wanted. Yi Chen wasn't unreasonable enough to stop others from participating. However, to Yi Chen, anyone who participated was an enemy. If they were an enemy, he would just kill them. It wasn't a big deal. But this was the crux of the problem. They had expressed goodwill before, but now they were suddenly aggressive. The contrast was too big. How could Yi Chen overlook this? Did they really want to recruit Gan Ning? Or did they have the confidence to deal with him? Or was this recruiting Gan Ning a ploy by them? Yi Chen couldn't help but think this way. After all, Yi Chen had just killed Li Mubai. Before he died, Yi Chen had said that there was a great secret, and that he would be killed on the spot. Yi Chen didn't know what the secret was. He couldn't even tell if Li Mubai was telling the truth or not. However, this didn't stop Yi Chen from combining Li Mubai's words with the hidden force's strange behavior and making an inference. There were many possibilities, but they were still within Yi Chen's acceptable range. After all, no one knew that Yi Chen cultivated the 9 revolutions mystic art and his body was freakishly strong. Furthermore, no one knew that Yi Chen's Godslayer was a Khanate cardinal treasure. Of course, Yi Chen also had the supreme grade Khanate spirit treasure, the treasure fall coin, the purple gold red gourd, the full set of 5 elements spirit pearls, and the cosmic bow. Of course, Yi Chen also had an even more freakish killing method, the red karmic fire lightning. These were the sources of Yi Chen's confidence. Therefore, Yi Chen wasn't afraid of conspiracies or trap. It didn't matter if these factions genuinely wanted Gan Ning or if they were trying to set him up. He was going to Ba Prefecture no matter what. Yi Chen narrowed his eyes and a cold glint flashed through them. In the next second, with a thought from Yi Chen, he took a step forward and disappeared from this place. Yi Chen had come to the palace gates to reply to Lu Hong. But now that the plot mission to subdue Gan Ning had appeared, Yi Chen naturally wouldn't ignore it. For Yi Chen, subduing historical generals and officials was much more important than replying to Lu Hong. In Ba Prefecture, beside a lake that stretched as far as the eye could see, space suddenly distorted. A second later, Yi Chen took a step forward and reappeared. Suddenly, cries of alarm rang out. Yi Chen! It's Yi Chen! Holy shit! I knew Yi Chen would come. He really did come, and so quickly, no less. I'm not greedy anymore. Whoever wants to stay can stay. I'm leaving. What's there to be afraid of? Whoever has the ability can get Gan Ning. No matter how strong Yi Chen is, he can't be unreasonable. Don't be ridiculous. I've never seen Yi Chen be reasonable. All I see is killing. The players spoke one after another. Some were afraid, some were terrified, some regretted, and some were unwilling. Yi Chen glanced at the players around him, then used his consciousness to cover an area of 1,000 miles. After a few breaths, Yi Chen looked directly at the island in the middle of the lake. Then, he narrowed his eyes and 2 rays of sword light flashed. So this was the Demon Slayer sword formation. Chapter 654. In Yi Chen's previous life, the Demon Slayer sword formation was a very famous killing formation in the Eldritch world. It was extremely powerful, and had a great suppressive effect on demons and evils. Normally, the Demon Slayer sword formation was used to deal with monsters and demons. However, there were many special cases, such as dealing with humans. This was the truth. In his previous life, many factions that had mastered the Demon Slayer sword formation would often use it to deal with the enemies they wanted to kill. The reason was simple. Although the Demon Slayer sword formation specialized in suppressing demons and evils, its killing power and concealment ability were also very strong. Even when used against humans, it was no exception. It was precisely because of these characteristics that many factions used the Demon Slayer sword formation to kill their human enemies. The reason why Yi Chen was able to discover the demon-slaying sword formation was because he had participated in the setting up of the demon-slaying sword formation in his previous life. If not for this reason, Yi Chen wouldn't have been able to discover the Demon Slayer sword formation so easily. Even if Yi Chen's consciousness could crush all players, there would be no exception. Of course, this wasn't important. What was important was that Gan Ning and his army were currently inside the Demon Slayer sword formation. If Yi Chen charged in directly, the Demon Slayer sword formation would definitely be activated. Even if Yi Chen's body was strong and he had a connate spiritual treasure to protect himself, he would only be able to protect a few people at most. The rest would be instantly killed by the Demon Slayer sword formation. Yi Chen wasn't just here to subdue Gan Ning, he was also here to take in all of Gan Ning's subordinate. After all, Gan Ning's subordinates were all special forces, the Jinfan Bandit. If he took in all of them, he would be able to use Gan Ning's full strength as a first-rate historical general. Of course, the mysterious faction that set up the Demon Slayer sword formation didn't know this. They also didn't know that Yi Chen could see through the Demon Slayer sword formation and wasn't afraid of it. Otherwise, the mysterious faction wouldn't have been able to set up the Demon Slayer sword formation so fearlessly against Yi Chen. At this thought, Yi Chen smiled coldly and shouted, "I'll take Gan Ning. Gan Ning, I'll accept it. If you don't want to die, get out of my sight in 3 minutes." Yi Chen's domineering and unreasonable words instantly attracted the attention of the players by the lake. After being momentarily stunned, an uproar broke out. F***CK. I told you, Yi Chen has never been easy to talk to. Anyone who dares to snatch something from Yi Chen must die. Then what the F***CK do we do? I don't want to die yet. Damn it, although Yi Chen is alone, he's a god martial state. Before he reached the mortal evolution state, he fought against tens of millions of people by himself. Now, don't be afraid. Isn't it just death? Don't forget that Limitless Palace, 7-Star Tower, and the other forces gave us enough money to make up for our losses. Don't bullshit. Yi Chen's black spear can not only destroy equipment, but it can also devour souls. If we were killed by Yi Chen with that spear, we would really be dead in the real world. Damn it, I quit. Who wants to earn that bit of money? Go and earn it. I haven't lived long enough. I'm leaving too. The players spoke one after another, and soon, a large number of players chose to leave. Yi Chen stood where he was, motionless. He waited there quietly, allowing the players to retreat. Time passed slowly, and the 3 minutes were up. Yi Chen looked at the players who still didn't choose to leave and smiled coldly. He waved his right hand, and the golden Xianyuan sword instantly appeared in Yi Chen's hand. Following Yi Chen's actions, the players who hadn't left all narrowed their eyes. Then, they shouted at Yi Chen one after another. "Lord Yu of Beach, I won't take part in this plot mission. Lord Yu of Beach, I won't take part in it either. I just want to see Gan Ning." "Me too, Lord Yu of Beach, please don't misunderstand." Yi Chen pursed his lips in disdain when he heard the words of the players who didn't want to leave. He raised his right hand, and the Xianyuan sword was instantly raised by Yi Chen. In the next second, Yi Chen slashed viciously at the remaining players. 1,000-meter-long azure sword aura instantly appeared. Then, it multiplied into 10,000 and 10,000 into 1,000,000. In the blink of an eye, the azure sword aura that Yi Chen sent out covered the entire sky. Then, with a piercing sound, it flew towards the player army and arrived in the blink of an eye. The players who were still shouting heaved a sigh of relief when they saw the green sword aura that blotted out the sky and covered the earth. This was because they weren't attacked by Yi Chen's black spear that could devour souls. As long as they weren't stabbed to death by the spear, they didn't have to worry about dying in the real world. Of course, even if they didn't have to worry about dying, they didn't want to be killed by the sword energy. They didn't hesitate and took out their weapons to block or dodge the sword energy. It was a pity that they had overlooked the speed of the sword energy. Just as they took out their weapons and were about to use their thighs to block the sword energy sliced through their bodies. The sound of their bodies being sliced rang out rapidly. Poochie, poochie, poochie. The players who didn't choose to leave froze in their actions of dodging the sword energy. At this moment, all the players whose bodies were sliced by the sword energy widened their eyes. Then, they looked extremely regretful. The moment they were about to die, they felt their souls being destroyed. That feeling made them tremble and despair. Although they didn't know the reason, they knew that their deaths this time were different from their deaths in the game world. As the players looked at them with fear and regret, the sound of their bodies exploding rang out. Boom, 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 without exception, all the players who had their bodies cut by the sword energy exploded into pieces that filled the sky. Pieces of red flesh, white bones, broken limbs, dark-colored organs, and broken intestines covered the ground. The originally clean ground instantly turned into a slaughterhouse in the Azura Hell. It was bloody and shocking. The remaining players looked at the bloody scene in front of them and couldn't help but shudder. When Yi Chen took out the Xianyuan sword, they were still relaxed because they didn't have to worry about dying in the real world. But now, the slaughterhouse created by Yi Chen's overbearing sword seriously stimulated their nerve. Although the number of players that Yi Chen attacked was far less than before Yi Chen arrived, there were still millions of players. That's right, there were 1,000,000 of them. However, Yi Chen had killed so many players with a single slash of his sword. Moreover, he had killed them all with ease. How could such a cruel, bloody, and domineering scene stimulate the remaining players? They heard that Yi Chen could kill millions of players, but that was the result of Yi Chen and the Samsara Legion attacking together. But now, Yi Chen actually killed millions of players with a single sword. Such a scene was much more insane than what they had heard. It was even more shocking. After a brief moment of silence, the sound of hundreds of thousands of people swallowing their saliva could be heard. Gulp, gulp. Chapter 655. Hundreds of thousands of people swallowed their saliva at the same time. That sound was unique. However, none of the remaining players appreciated it. At this moment, they only had one thought in their minds, and that was to run away quickly. They couldn't stay here any longer. At the thought of this, the remaining players took out a piece of talisman paper and used it without hesitation. In the next second, patches of earthy yellow light lit up. Yi Chen, who had just turned around and was about to kill the players in this direction, saw this and couldn't help but frown. Speed talisman. I was wondering why these people didn't want to leave. It was because of the speed talisman. The speed talisman's effect was to increase speed by 10 times. As for the upper limit, Yi Chen really didn't know. However, in Yi Chen's previous life, he had seen a speed talisman that could increase speed by 10,000 times. It was also because Yi Chen knew about the speed talisman and had seen others use it that he realized why the players, who were only at the innate stage, were so confident in ignoring Yi Chen's threat and chose to stay. He didn't know how many times the speed talisman was, but even if it was 10,000 times, so what? Thinking of this, Yi Chen smiled coldly. Then, he raised the Xianyuan sword and slashed at the remaining players. With a buzzing sound, a green sword aura that was 1,000 meters long appeared in an instant. Then, it turned into millions of sword auras and shot rapidly at the remaining players. Run! After a series of terrified screams, the remaining players all started running at an extremely fast speed. However, they had just run less than 100 meters when the overwhelming sword auras came slashing at them. The dense sound of bodies being cut apart instantly rang out. Poochie, 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 the movement of the remaining players came to an abrupt halt. Then, a large number of halves of their bodies fell forward due to inertia. Countless broken limbs also flew up due to their mad dash. Bzzzt, bzzzt. Fresh blood spurted out. Splash, splash. Intestines and organs flowed out freely. At this moment, all the players' eyes were filled with, "I knew it," and extremely regretful. It was true that they were afraid of Yi Chen. After all, everyone knew of Yi Chen's brutality. However, what they were most afraid of wasn't Yi Chen, but Yi Chen's Godslayer. This was because if they were killed by the Godslayer, they would also die in the real world. As for the reason why they ignored Yi Chen's threat and insisted on staying here, it was because they were all innate realm players. Moreover, they had all received the mysterious powers gold coins and the mysterious powers, magical talismans. In their subconscious minds, as long as they used the magical talisman, they would be able to avoid Yi Chen's Godslayer. This was because they had true qi in their bodies. As long as they poured true qi into their legs, their speed would explosively increase. In addition to that magical talisman, even if Yi Chen was in the god martial realm, what could he do? As long as they were fast enough, Yi Chen would not be able to attack them. Even if Yi Chen used other methods to deal with them, such as large-scale magic attacks, they wouldn't be afraid. If they died, so be it. After all, they had received enough money to make up for their losses. Moreover, the power that gave them the talisman also promised that if they lost any equipment, they would replace it with equipment of the same grade. What was there to worry about? If they could help the power that gave them the money subdue Gan Ning, or even subdue Gan Ning themselves, then they would have profited greatly. If they had the chance to kill Yi Chen, then it would be even better. This was because they would gain even more. It was for this reason that they had ignored Yi Chen's threat. But now, the cruel reality told them one thing: they had thought too highly of themselves. Yi Chen, the #1 player of the human race, was completely different from the god martial realm they had imagined. To be more precise, Yi Chen was a freak, a super freak. Damn, he had used his vital energy and the magical talisman. His speed had increased by more than 100 times, or even 1,000 times. But even with such a fast speed, he still couldn't escape Yi Chen's sword energy. If this wasn't a freak, then what was? Of course, this wasn't important. What was important was that after being attacked by Yi Chen's sword energy, their souls were rapidly destroyed. That was the most important thing. The gamers' thoughts only lasted for a split second. When they were done, their gazes were filled with fear. No, I don't want to die. The players who had been cut into 2 or even several pieces, but hadn't died completely, all let out terrified screams in unison. In the next second, the sound of bodies exploding was heard. Bang, bang, bang. The bodies of the players who had been running wildly but had suddenly stopped were all blown into pieces. The yellow earth was instantly covered in blood and broken limbs. A light breeze blew, and the smell of blood filled the air. Yi Chen glanced at the bloody flesh and broken limbs on the ground and pursed his lips in disdain. I told you to get lost if you didn't want to die. Who can you blame for being so confident? Thinking of this, Yi Chen looked at the players who had run far away and stopped to watch. Following Yi Chen's action, the players who had been shocked by Yi Chen's domineering attack took a few steps back in unison. At this moment, thousands of beams of light appeared in the players' army in the distance. Without exception, the players who had come online were all shocked. Then, their shock turned into fear. In the next second, the World Channel, which had been bustling with activity because of the plot mission of subduing Gan Ning, was instantly flooded with a similar message. The person who was killed by Yi Chen's sword is also dead in the real world. I'm in Magic City. Me too. When Yi Chen attacked, I felt that something was wrong, so I ran far away and went offline to check on the people who participated in the plot mission. In the end, they're all dead. I'm in Beijing. Me too. I'm in XX. This series of messages instantly blew up the World Channel. F***CK. F***CK. What's going on? Isn't Yi Chen's black spear the only one who can devour souls? Why can a sword do it too? F***CK. It's not the sword that can destroy souls. Look carefully, it's the sword aura that can do it. In other words, Yi Chen only needs to use his sword. He doesn't even need to touch the body. He only needs to use his sword to kill someone. F***CK. Does he have to be so sick? Who would dare to go against Yi Chen in the future? Idiot, it's fine if you don't go against him. Anyway, I've always treated Boss Yi Chen as my only idol, hee hee. Boss Yi Chen is the best. I won't explain. I'll ask you if you're convinced. Chapter 656. What's there to be convinced of? I'm not convinced. Yi Chen is cheating. I can release sword energy too. Why can't I kill people directly? That's right. He's cheating. From the beginning, I've said that Yi Chen is cheating. Now I'll add another sentence. Yi Chen didn't cheat. I'll write my name backwards. Motherf asterisk Ker. The more I think about it, the angrier I get. I was still thinking of joining forces to fight against Yi Chen later. Motherf asterisk Ker. Yi Chen can kill people just by casually releasing his sword chi. How are we supposed to fight? Continue? Who says we can't continue? Just surrender. Once we surrender, we can continue playing. F asterisk CK. The battle for supremacy hasn't even started and it's already over. Once Yi Chen makes his move, no one will have a good time. I'm not convinced. Yi Chen glanced at the world channel that was constantly flooding the screen and smiled coldly. Why did the players become so agitated after the news of Yi Chen releasing sword energy could kill souls was exposed? Others might not know, but how could Yi Chen not know? To be precise, the players who were spouting nonsense on the world channel were shocked, envious, and fearful. Basically, all of them had the intention of challenging Yi Chen. Of course, this was on the bright side. To put it bluntly, there were still many players who hadn't given up on challenging Yi Chen. It couldn't be helped. From the start of the game until now, Yi Chen had obtained too many good things. Moreover, Yi Chen had subdued so many historical generals, historical civil officials, and historical beauties. All of them were either first-rate or super first-rate. It was impossible not to be jealous. And the result of jealousy would basically turn into enmity. And there was only one result of hostility. The players would think of ways to deal with Yi Chen. Of course, after Yi Chen's massacre, the gamers realized how powerful and perverse Yi Chen was. Hence, no one dared to attack Yi Chen. After all, Yi Chen could kill people in the real world as well. This was too abnormal. Moreover, even if Yi Chen did not use the Godslayer, the players would not be able to stop the Samsara City army. In order to prevent themselves from suffering losses or even being killed by Yi Chen, the players behaved themselves. But no matter how honest the gamers were, they didn't give up on dealing with Yi Chen. Without exception, they were all waiting for an opportunity to kill Yi Chen. Today, the army of players that had reached the innate realm and participated in the mysterious organization's invitation was a clear proof. They had come all the way here and ignored Yi Chen's warning. Other than wanting to reap some benefits, they were also here to test themselves. To be precise, the players wanted to know if there was really no way to deal with Yi Chen. If there was a way, they wouldn't hesitate to target Yi Chen. But who would have thought that the result would shock everyone? They couldn't fight against Yi Chen at all. Even if they used the speed talisman, it would be useless. Of course, this wasn't important. What was important was that Yi Chen could kill people in the real world even if he didn't use the Godslayer. This caused the players who wanted to attack Yi Chen to be greatly agitated. It couldn't be helped. When Yi Chen killed people in the game and in the real world, the Godslayer had to attack the players' bodies in order to do so. Now, however, Yi Chen could obliterate a player's soul simply by releasing his sword energy. Then, the player would die for good. How could the players not be afraid when they saw how insane this was? After all, other than perverts or people who were in extreme despair, no one was willing to die. No one was afraid of death. It was also because of this that the World Channel suddenly became so lively. Many players were worried about this, worried about that, and even angry. They vented their anger and fear on the World Channel. They didn't want to be under Yi Chen. They wanted to rise up and fight for all the good things. However, the news that shocked and terrified them mercilessly told them one thing. If they wanted to fight against Yi Chen, they had to be prepared to die. Originally, I thought that many people would give up on fighting for supremacy. I didn't expect so many people to suddenly appear after today's explosion. It looks like I underestimated the players' inner desires. Even if they don't want to give up, it's no big deal. At most, I'll kill them all." Thinking of this, Yi Chen narrowed his eyes. A cold glint flashed across his eyes. In the next second, Yi Chen used his divine sense to look at the center of the lake. To be precise, he looked at the tens of thousands of players hidden on the island in the middle of the lake. These people were from the mysterious force. Each of them was only at the innate stage, but they wanted to use the Demon Slayer sword formation to deal with him, although he didn't know how to break the formation. But thinking of this, Yi Chen smiled coldly. Then, he raised his left hand and an ancient golden army character appeared on the ground. The army character was surrounded by golden light, forming a huge golden disc. Inside it, tiny golden runes swam continuously. Yi Chen was standing in the middle of it. At the same time, the sound of Tao could be heard. In the distance, the army of players who were watching Yi Chen were stunned when they saw the strange phenomenon that suddenly appeared under Yi Chen's feet. Then, there was an uproar. F***CK. What kind of spell is this? It's too damn cool. I'm not sure what kind of spell it is, but I know one thing. Yi Chen is going to use a big move. F***CK. Do I need you to tell me that? Just as the players were discussing, the sound of tens of thousands of swords vibrating suddenly came from the island in the middle of the lake. Buzz, buzz, buzz. The sound was orderly, and the sound was getting louder. On the island in the middle of the lake, the expressions of the players with ancient longswords in their hands changed at the same time. What's going on? Why are the swords out of control? After one of them came back to his senses, he quickly grabbed the ancient sword that was vibrating more and more violently. Then, he shouted in a low voice. Yi Chen is making his move. Quick! Use your true qi. You must control the swords. The middle-aged man who was in charge of the Demon Slayer sword formation looked gloomily at the shore that was covered by reeds. Then, he shouted in a deep voice. As soon as the middle-aged man finished speaking, the players who were holding ancient swords circulated the true qi in their bodies and infused it into the swords. They wanted to use their true qi to control the ancient swords that were vibrating more and more violently and were about to fly away. However, at this moment, the tens of thousands of ancient swords that had been infused with true qi suddenly vibrated. Clang! After the sound, the swords instantly left the right hands of the players who were hiding on the island in the middle of the lake. Then, they quickly flew into the sky. By the lake, Yi Chen glanced at the tens of thousands of ancient swords that were controlled by the army formula and flew into the sky. After being stunned for a moment, he looked at the island in the middle of the lake with a playful expression. He didn't expect that these people from the mysterious force would have magic artifacts in their hands. Moreover, it was 10,000 magic artifact-level swords. Not bad, not bad. I got lucky. Chapter 657. The weapons and equipment in the primordial world were ranked from lowest to highest. Dharma artifacts, spirit artifacts, Dharma artifacts, immortal artifacts, divine artifacts, postnatal numinous treasures, postnatal cardinal treasures, connate numinous treasures, connate cardinal treasures, chaos numinous treasures, and chaos cardinal treasures. Dharma artifacts were ranked last in the primordial world above heaven-level weapons. They were the worst weapons in the primordial world. However, in the Three Kingdoms Novice Zone, Dharma artifacts were basically equivalent to divine artifacts. This was because their attack power far exceeded heaven-level weapons. Of course, this was not the key. The most important thing was that although heaven-level weapons were considered top weapons in the mortal world, they were still considered mortal. As for Dharma artifacts, they were already extraordinary. Heaven-level weapons could not compare to them at all. Take the Three Kingdoms Novice Zone as an example. Be it players or natives, if they encountered an opponent with a Dharma artifact, and the players or natives themselves did not have the protection of equipment above the Dharma artifact level, they would be crippled if not killed. Even if they wore heaven-level armor, it would be useless. And this was also the reason why Yi Chen was happy. After all, even when Yi Chen killed so many monsters, during the Golden Turban Rebellion and the Demon Invasion, he did not obtain any Dharma artifacts. However, the mysterious faction had obtained 10,000 of them. Furthermore, Yi Chen was worried about how to equip his generals with higher-grade equipment. Now that there were 10,000 Dharma artifact swords, Yi Chen naturally would not let them go. Of course, Yi Chen would not directly give the Dharma artifacts to his generals. What Yi Chen wanted to do was to directly throw the Dharma artifacts into the Khanate Cardinal Treasure, the Cosmic Cauldron, and refine them. After the Dharma artifacts were upgraded to Dharma treasures, he would reward the generals with the weapons. After all, Yi Chen had completed the mythical unique mission, the War of Providence, and received the Khanate Cardinal Treasure, the Cosmic Cauldron, as a reward. Yi Chen had not used the Cosmic Cauldron all this time because the standard equipment needed by Yi Chen's army had yet to be refined. When the heaven-grade standard equipment for the soldiers was completed, Yi Chen naturally wouldn't let go of the Cauldron of Heaven and Earth, which could increase the grade of equipment and turn acquired into innate. Once the Cauldron of Heaven and Earth was used, the equipment of Yi Chen's army would be upgraded from heaven grade to spirit grade. However, even so, Yi Chen was unable to upgrade the equipment of his generals from heaven grade to something above spirit grade. For example, Dharma treasures. If that was the case, it wouldn't make sense for the general to have the same grade equipment as the soldiers. However, even if Yi Chen was reborn, he would not be able to solve this problem. After all, the highest grade of equipment that Yi Chen's generals possessed was heaven grade. After being refined by the Cauldron of Heaven and Earth, it was at most a spiritual artifact. It couldn't be any higher than that. Now, the problem that had been troubling Yi Chen had finally taken a turn for the better. The mysterious force that had schemed against Yi Chen had actually produced 10,000 Dharma treasures. As long as Yi Chen obtained these 10,000 Dharma treasures, he would naturally be able to use the Cauldron of Heaven and Earth to refine them and upgrade them to Dharma treasures. Then, he would bestow them to his generals. At the thought of this, Yi Chen couldn't help but smirk. Then, he used his mind. In the next second, the 10,000 Dharma treasure-grade longswords that were controlled by the army formula and flew into the sky instantly glowed with golden light. At this moment, a series of extremely powerful and sharp auras burst out from the ground. The 10,000 players from the mysterious force on the island in the middle of the lake all changed their expressions when they saw this. At this moment, a feeling of extreme danger appeared in everyone's hearts. It was a feeling that directly threatened their lives. It was very strange and eerie, but it really appeared in their hearts. Just as they were shocked and then started to feel fear, the 10,000 golden longswords that were glowing with golden light vibrated simultaneously. An incomparably dense tremor instantly sounded. Buzz, buzz, buzz. The 10,000 Dharma treasure-grade longswords that were glowing with golden light suddenly emitted streaks of green sword chi. However, what was shocking was that the sword chi that suddenly appeared was actually attached to the longswords and did not dissipate. On the island in the middle of the lake, the middle-aged man who was in charge of the formation suddenly received dozens of messages from his friends. In the next second, the middle-aged man's expression changed dramatically, and then he shouted in shock, "Run!" At the lakeside, Yi Chen, whose divine sense had locked onto the island, smiled coldly when he heard this. Then, he pointed the sword finger of his left hand at the island in the middle of the lake. In the next second, 10,000 Dharma treasure-grade longswords that were wrapped in green sword chi and emitting golden light at the same time shot rapidly toward the island. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh! The sound of something breaking through the air rang out in an instant. 10,000 streaks of golden light crashed into the ground like meteors and arrived in the blink of an eye. In the next second, the sound of 10,000 longswords piercing through bodies suddenly sounded. Poochie, 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 on the island in the middle of the lake, 10,000 players from the mysterious force had just run a few hundred meters when their bodies were pierced by the Dharma treasure-grade longswords that were emitting golden light and wrapped in green sword chi. They were then nailed to the ground. At this moment, their movements of running away were instantly frozen. In the next second, a series of sounds of bodies exploding suddenly rang out. Bang, 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 the 10,000 players from the mysterious force, without exception, exploded into pieces that filled the sky. At the lakeside, Yi Chen, whose divine sense had locked onto the island, curled his lips in disdain when he saw this. Then, he frowned. The Demon Slayer sword formation plate. He did not expect these bastards to know how to make this. Under normal circumstances, the Demon Slayer sword formation needed someone to be in charge and support to unleash the true power of the Demon Slayer sword formation. Apart from this method, the Demon Slayer sword formation plate could also be used to activate the Demon Slayer sword formation plate. Of course, after using the Demon Slayer sword formation disc, the Demon Slayer sword formation's power would not be as great as if it were controlled by someone else. However, it was undeniable that the Demon Slayer sword formation disc controlled the Demon Slayer sword formation disc's lethality was not to be underestimated. Moreover, it was very easy to control, even remotely. Of course, Yi Chen was not afraid of this. But don't forget that Gan Ning and his subordinates were still on the island. If Yi Chen ignored the Demon Slayer sword formation disc and activated it remotely, then Gan Ning and his subordinates would not be able to escape. The mysterious force had prepared for both sides. If they can't kill me, then they'll kill Gan Ning and his subordinates. How cunning, however, they were dreaming if they thought they could succeed. At this thought, Yi Chen's eyes suddenly widened and he pointed at the island with his left hand without hesitation. In the next second, 10,000 enchanted longswords flew into the air and shot towards the center of the island. To be more precise, they were shooting towards the Demon Slayer sword formation disc buried in the ground at the center of the island. Before, Yi Chen had not detected the Demon Slayer sword formation disc. Now that Yi Chen had killed 10,000 players from the mysterious force, the Demon Slayer sword formation disc was exposed to Yi Chen's divine sense. Naturally, Yi Chen would not ignore it. After all, Yi Chen did not only want to subdue Gan Ning, but also Gan Ning's subordinate. Yi Chen wanted to subdue them as well. After all, Gan Ning's subordinates were all genuine special forces, the Jin Fan Bandits. Chapter 658. The magic artifact longswords that were enhanced by the Army Formula and Green Lotus sword technique shot toward the Demon Slayer sword array formation with Yi Chen's thought. At this moment, the Demon Slayer sword array formation hidden in the center of the island suddenly shook. Then, a huge light shield suddenly enveloped the island. At the same time, tens of thousands of sword auras suddenly shot out from the Demon Slayer sword array formation. The Demon Slayer sword array formation was activated. Yi Chen, who had his divine sense locked onto the island, saw this and smiled coldly. At this moment, tens of thousands of magic artifact longswords that were enhanced by the Army Formula and Green Lotus sword technique stabbed into the ground and hit the Demon Slayer sword array formation. Poochie, Poochie, Poochie! The sound of sharp blades cutting through meat instantly rang out. In the next second, the Demon Slayer sword array formation that had just been activated suddenly exploded and turned into countless pieces. The Demon Slayer sword array that was about to wreak havoc suddenly stopped. The tens of thousands of sword auras that shot out from the Demon Slayer sword array formation also shot into the sky and disappeared. In the distance, hundreds of players in the player army that had been observing Yi Chen saw the changes on the island in the lake. Their expressions changed, and they all turned around and left without hesitation. Yi Chen, who had just destroyed the Demon Slayer sword array formation, suddenly turned around and flew into the sky. In the next second, Yi Chen raised the Xianyuan sword in his right hand and pointed into the distance. A buzzing sound was heard. A huge green circle of light instantly appeared in the sky above the player army that was watching from afar. Yi Chen suddenly attacked the players in the distance because of the players who suddenly left. After Yi Chen destroyed the Demon Slayer sword array formation, their expressions changed drastically. There was only one reason for such a situation. These people were all players from the mysterious faction. Otherwise, they wouldn't have such expressions. In the distance, the players who saw Yi Chen suddenly attack all paled. At this moment, everyone had the same thought. Yi Chen wanted to kill them. Boss. Yi Chen. I didn't want to participate in this mission, and I don't want to be your enemy. I just wanted to see. I swear, I really just wanted to see. Don't kill me. I don't want to die. I'm just here to watch. Obviously, the players were frightened by Yi Chen's actions. At this moment, other than the players who saw Yi Chen destroy the Demon Slayer sword array formation turned around and left immediately, none of the remaining players tried to escape. It wasn't because they didn't want to Yi Chen, they knew that they couldn't escape. The speed of Yi Chen's sword energy was simply too fast. They were very far away from Yi Chen, but the green circle of light had appeared above them. No matter how fast they ran, they would not be able to escape from Yi Chen's attack range. The players who had obtained the Divine Speed Talismans from the 7-Star Tower, Limitless Palace, and other forces were proof of this. Slayer Slayer Sword Slayer. Slayer 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 Technique Formula. Slayer 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 Air Slayer. Most likely, before they could run a few hundred meters, they would be killed on the spot, just like the players who had been killed by Yi Chen. At that moment, all the players were filled with fear and regret. If they had known that Yi Chen would make a move on them, they wouldn't have stayed to watch how Yi Chen subdued Gan Ning. However, to their despair, Yi Chen, who had already started attacking, had no intention of stopping at all. Because in the cyan halo that suddenly appeared in the sky, circles of cyan water ripples suddenly appeared. Then, cyan light swords suddenly drilled out of the cyan water ripples. It was a beautiful scene, but none of the players were willing to appreciate it. Because Yi Chen was making a move. Just as the players were filled with terror and despair, the expressions of the hundreds of players who had suddenly left fell. They didn't hesitate to take out talisman papers and use them, causing their speed to increase by 2,000 times. At that moment, hundreds of cyan light swords suddenly drilled out of the cyan ripples in the cyan halo. Then, they turned into cyan streams of light and disappeared in a flash. In the next second, a series of piercing sounds were heard. Poochie, poochie, poochie. The players who had just used the speed talisman to increase their speed were all pierced by the light swords without exception. In the next second, a series of explosions were heard. Bam, 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 in the sky. Yi Chen sneered when he saw the players who had fled being killed on the spot. Then, he flew directly toward the island in the middle of the lake. In the distance, the players who saw that Yi Chen had stopped after killing hundreds of players were all stunned. Then, they all let out long sighs of relief. That scared me to death. I thought, you of Beach was going to kill us, me too. That was close, so close. By the way, did you notice that something was wrong? Why did Yi Chen only kill those who had fled and let us go? I don't know. I was too scared and didn't look at those people. I don't know the specifics. However, judging from their positions, these people should have also used those talismans that can increase their speed. The people that Yi Chen just killed also had talismans. It must be because of this. I don't think it's because of that. Don't forget where the speed talisman came from. Because it doesn't matter. I just want to leave quickly. In the future, even if I'm beaten to death, I won't be so curious anymore. Yi Chen is too dangerous. Let's go, the players chatted amongst themselves and left the place in a hurry. On the island in the middle of the lake. As soon as Yi Chen arrived, a young man dressed as a ranger, leading a group of similarly dressed soldiers, suddenly ran out from the island's drill ground. The moment he saw Yi Chen, the young man knelt on one knee and bowed loudly. Gan Ning, Gan Xingba of the Ba Commandery is willing to acknowledge the great general of agile cavalry as my master. Please accept us, my lord. Following Gan Ning's words, the thousands of soldiers who followed Gan Ning out knelt down on one knee and bowed loudly. Please accept us, my lord. At this moment, a system notification sounded. Ding! The historical generals Gan Ning and Gan Xingba have surrendered. Do you accept? When the system notification ended, Yi Chen could not help but feel stunned. What's going on? Didn't they say that Gan Ning would only acknowledge him as his master after he defeated him? Why did he acknowledge him as his master? Damn, I almost forgot that I'm still flying. Moreover, Gan Ning and his subordinates seem to have seen how I dealt with the players of the mysterious faction. This will save me a lot of trouble. Thinking of this, Yi Chen raised his eyebrows. He landed on the ground and walked up to Gan Ning in a few steps. Yi Chen smiled as he looked at the respectful and shocked Gan Ning and his subordinate. Then, he helped Gan Ning up and said, "From now on, you will be the 13th Commandery commander. From today onwards, you'll be the 13th General of the Reincarnation Immortal City. You'll still be the commander of your soldiers. Gan Ning and Gan Xingba pay their respects to my lord." Gan Ning was stunned for a moment before he bowed in ecstasy. Chapter 659. In Gan Ning's opinion, Yi Chen, the great general of the cavalry of the Great Han Empire, who had almost single-handedly quelled the Golden Scarf Rebellion and swept away the demon army that invaded the mortal realm, might take him in. After all, there were rumors that Yi Chen liked to recruit talent. Gan Ning believed that he wasn't much worse than other generals, especially when it came to naval warfare. Therefore, it was very likely that Yi Chen would accept him. However, Gan Ning didn't think that Yi Chen would value him that much. After all, he was only the leader of the Jin Fan Bandits. Although he had made a name for himself with his subordinates and never harmed the common people, a bandit was still a bandit. This was an identity that couldn't be changed. As for Yi Chen, he was Yu of Beech of the Great Han Empire, the governor of Yuzhou, and the great general of the cavalry of Yuzhou. More terrifyingly, Yi Chen could fly. In addition, the scene of 10,000 swords flying together and sword aura filling the sky was enough to prove one thing. The great general of the cavalry of the Great Han Empire, Yi Chen, was a proper immortal. It was already good enough to take in such an existence. Why would Yi Chen value a mere bandit? However, not only did Yi Chen take him in without hesitation, he valued him and even trusted him. Otherwise, why would Yi Chen give him the position of general and allow him to continue leading his subordinates? How could Gan Ning, a bandit, not be shocked, touched, and excited? The system notification sounded as soon as Gan Ning finished speaking. Ding! Gan Ning, Gan Xingba's loyalty +10. Advanced to loyal. When the system notification ended, Yi Chen could not help but raise his eyebrows. Not bad, another loyal subordinate. As Yi Chen thought of this, Gan Ning's Jin Fan Bandits bowed to Yi Chen in unison. "Greetings, master." Yi Chen chuckled and nodded. He helped Gan Ning up and asked, "Have you seen Xingba before?" "Xingba, have we met before?" When Yi Chen arrived on the island, Gan Ning led his men to greet him. He even called out Yi Chen's name. It was obvious that he recognized Yi Chen. However, Yi Chen didn't have any impression of Gan Ning. Otherwise, Yi Chen wouldn't have asked this question. Upon hearing Yi Chen's question, Gan Ning hurriedly shook his head and bowed. Reporting to the Lord, Ning has never seen the Lord. However, Ning and Ning's subordinates have just been trapped in the drill ground and are unable to come out. Unexpectedly, Ning heard the person who trapped us call out the Lord's name. After that, Ning saw the process of 10,000 swords flying together, sword chi filling the sky. Thus, Ning was able to confirm that my lord was the Great Han Empire's general of light cavalry. I see. When Yi Chen heard this, he was slightly taken aback. Then, he chuckled and nodded. Gan Ning looked at Yi Chen gratefully, then bowed and said, "Thank you for your kindness. Ning thanks the Lord for saving our lives." "Thank you, my lord, for saving our lives." The embroidered sail bandits all bowed in unison. "There's no need for that. The reason why I'm here is to invite you all to join my reincarnation immortal city. Who would have thought that I would be caught in a trap by a thief? How can I possibly ignore it?" When Yi Chen heard this, he smiled and said. When Gan Ning and his Jin Fan bandits heard this, they all felt warmth in their hearts. They then bowed and said loudly, "We swear to follow the Lord until death. If we violate this oath, may the heavens and earth destroy us." Yi Chen spoke casually, but Gan Ning and his men knew that if it wasn't for Yi Chen's help, they would have died. It was precisely because they knew that they were so touched. After all, with Yi Chen's status, it didn't matter if he helped or not. Yi Chen chuckled and nodded. With a wave of his right hand, 10,000 magic longswords that had destroyed the Demon Punisher sword formation flew out of the ground and hovered in front of Yi Chen. Gan Ning and his men's eyes lit up when they saw the 10,000 flying swords again. At the same time, a strong sense of pride rose from their bodies. That was because their master, Yi Chen, was the legendary omnipotent immortal. How could they not be excited and proud to be able to follow such a master? After all, Yi Chen was the only immortal in the entire Great Han Empire. As for the others, they had never seen or heard of them. Yi Chen couldn't help but smile when he sensed the aura of Gan Ning and his subordinate. With a thought, he put the 10,000 magic tool-level longswords into his small world. Yi Chen couldn't help but raise his eyebrows when he saw the 10,000 magic artifact-level swords in the pocket world. These magic tool-level swords should have been brought along by the inheritance of those mysterious forces. He didn't know how many more there were, or if there were any of a higher grade. Then again, these bastards had so many good things, but they were still so miserable. They were truly useless. Yi Chen pursed his lips at this thought. He looked at Gan Ning and said, "I'll open the portal. I'll open the teleportation gate now. You guys can enter one by one and you'll reach the reincarnation immortal city. If you need anything, look for Feng Shao or Zizhong. If you don't understand anything, ask them, Yunzheng, Dianxiong, or the others. Also, you can fill the quota of 100,000 soldiers with your own soldiers. You must integrate them into the navy as soon as possible because you'll be on the battlefield soon." "Yes, my lord. My lord." Gan Ning's eyes widened and he bowed in excitement. Yi Chen nodded. Then, he focused his mind. In the next second, an enormous distorted space 10 meters wide and 10 meters tall appeared. Yi Chen glanced at the distorted space and said to Gan Ning, "Don't worry. Go." "Yes, my lord." Gan Ning nodded and bowed. "Yes, your majesty." He turned to the brocade sail bandits and called out, "Go! Move out!" "Yes, General." The brocade sail bandits called out in unison and followed Gan Ning into the distorted space. 10 minutes later, Gan Ning and his subordinates walked into the distorted space and disappeared. Upon seeing this, Yi Chen let out a faint smile. With a thought, the space before him began to distort. Yi Chen smiled faintly at the newly appeared distorted space and stepped inside, vanishing without a trace. In a deserted corner outside the palace gates of Luoyang, space suddenly twisted. In the next second, Yi Chen stepped out and appeared here. First, he'd reply to Lu Hong, then investigate the location of the mysterious faction in the game world. When Yi Chen thought of this, he naturally wanted to deal with the mysterious force. After all, the mysterious faction had plotted against Yi Chen. Whether or not they were testing him and regretting their actions didn't stop Yi Chen from seeking revenge. Chapter 660. To Yi Chen, regardless of whether they were plotting against him or taking action, they were all enemies. Yi Chen would only choose one method: to kill them. The method was cruel and overbearing, but this was the principle that Yi Chen had always followed. Moreover, Yi Chen's principle had never changed for anyone, and would not change for anyone. Even if the person was a woman, a child, or even an old person, Yi Chen would not be soft-hearted. Whether it was cruel or ruthless, Yi Chen did not care. If he had to say that he cared, Yi Chen only cared about one thing: to become the strongest emperor. No one could stop him, no one dared to stop him. He was the strongest emperor in the world. Thinking of this, Yi Chen immediately walked toward the gate of the imperial palace. Following Yi Chen's arrival, the imperial guards guarding the entrance of the palace were slightly stunned. They all looked at Yi Chen and then bowed to Yi Chen, saying, "Senior brother Yi Chen, please forgive me. Greetings, General of Agile Cavalry." Hearing this, Yi Chen chuckled and nodded. At this moment, the commander of the imperial guards guarding the gate of the imperial palace hurriedly shouted to his soldiers, "Open the gate." As soon as he finished speaking, the gate of the palace opened with a creak. Yi Chen glanced at it and walked in with a smile. Imperial Palace, Great Hall. Lu Hong narrowed his eyes when he saw the second prince, Lu Xie, wake up after being treated by the imperial physicians. He then coldly shouted, "Lu Xie! Xie, do you know your crime?" Lu Hong saw the evil spirit possessing second prince Lu Xie with his own eyes. He also knew that second prince Lu Xie had no choice but to do so. However, Lu Hong could not let it go. Otherwise, Lu Hong would not have questioned Lu Xie as soon as he woke up. His attitude was so cold that it could even be said that he was angry. When second prince Lu Xie, who had just woken up, heard Lu Hong's words, he suddenly shivered and hurriedly knelt on the ground and stammered, "Father, father, your son knows his crime." Clearly, the second prince of the Great Han Empire, Lu Xie, was very clear about what had happened when his body was taken over by Li Mubai. Otherwise, Lu Xie would not have confessed so easily. When Lu Hong heard this, his face immediately sank. Just as he was about to speak, a young eunuch suddenly walked into the great hall and bowed to Lu Hong. "Your Majesty, Lord Yu of Beech requests an audience." Quickly! When Lu Hong heard this, he stared blankly for a moment. Then, his eyes brightened and he looked at the young eunuch. When he heard this, the young eunuch hurriedly bowed and said, "Yes, Your Majesty." When he finished speaking, he hurriedly left the great hall. At this moment, Zhang Li, who was standing next to Lu Hong and had already been detoxified by the imperial physician, suddenly bowed to Lu Hong with a smile. "Congratulations, Your Majesty." "Congratulations, Your Majesty." Presumably, Lord Yu of Beech has already successfully exterminated the evil spirit. Your Majesty can rest easy now. Ha ha ha, that must be the case. This good son-in-law of mine has never disappointed me. When Lu Hong heard this, he laughed and said. When the second prince Lu Xie, who was kneeling on the ground and silently waiting for Lu Hong's punishment, heard this, his eyes suddenly brightened. He then bowed to Lu Hong and said, "Father, I have something to say. Speak." Lu Hong looked at Lu Xie with some disgust and then said with a humph. When Lu Xie heard the anger in Lu Hong's words, his eyes immediately became misty. In the next second, Lu Xie said in a choked voice, "Father, I am only 8 years old. I am only 8 years old, and that evil spirit is an adult. I have fought with it with my soul no less than 1,000 times, but I was still unable to shake it. I beg for Father's punishment." When Lu Xie finished speaking, Zhang Li, who was standing next to Lu Hong's dragon throne, suddenly narrowed his eyes. As for Lu Hong, he was taken aback and then let out a long sigh. At this moment, Lu Hong's attitude towards Lu Xie finally warmed up quite a bit. When Lu Xie, who was kneeling in the great hall, saw this, his eyes immediately let out a sigh of relief. At this moment, Yi Chen arrived in the great hall. After glancing at the kneeling second prince, Yi Chen looked directly at Lu Hong and bowed. "Greetings, Your Majesty." When Lu Hong heard this, he hurriedly asked, "Honorable son-in-law, have you exterminated that evil spirit?" Yi Chen nodded and then bowed. "Reporting to your majesty, this humble subject has already exterminated the evil spirit. His accomplices have also been exterminated by this humble subject." "Good, good, ha ha." When Lu Hong heard this, he stood up with a ting sound. Then, he laughed excitedly. At this moment, the second prince, Lu Xie, who was kneeling in the great hall, suddenly turned around and faced Yi Chen. He solemnly bowed and said, "Yi Chen. Lu Xie thanks brother-in-law for saving my life." When Yi Chen heard this, he immediately frowned and moved away from where Lu Xie was kneeling. Only then did he say with incomparable seriousness, "Second prince, you are too serious. How can this king stand by and watch when evil spirits wreak havoc in the imperial palace?" Lu Xie immediately thanked Yi Chen. This was nothing. After all, Yi Chen had indeed saved him. This was something Yi Chen could accept. But this brat Lu Xie was kneeling to express his gratitude. This was a different matter altogether. After all, no matter how rebellious Lu Xie was, he was still the second prince of the great Han Empire, a true member of the imperial bloodline. How could he kneel to Yi Chen? If Yi Chen didn't avoid where Lu Xie was kneeling, there would be a great deal of trouble. Yi Chen wasn't afraid, but Yi Chen would be criticized by the common people. He would also be disliked by Lu Hong and the other civil and military officials of the court. There would even be people who would jump up and curse Yi Chen for being disrespectful and rebellious. There was nothing to be done about it. This was the concept of hierarchy in this era. Even if Yi Chen was Yu of Beech, he wasn't worthy of Lu Xie kneeling to him. Unless Yi Chen raised his flag right now, exterminated Lu Hong, exterminated the Great Han, and then unified the world. Otherwise, Yi Chen would have to avoid where Lu Xie was kneeling. Of course, this wasn't important. What was important was that at such a young age, Lu Xie actually wanted to plot against Yi Chen. This was truly beyond Yi Chen's expectations. Damn, I don't think I've offended this little bastard before. Why did this little bastard want to plot against me? Yi Chen narrowed his eyes, a cold glint flashing through them. Hold on, just as Yi Chen was thinking this, Lu Hong saw Lu Xie's actions and couldn't help but frown. Then, he sternly shouted, "I'll send people to strengthen your body. I will send someone to teach you martial arts to strengthen your body. In addition, you should eat more tonics. Your body is too weak. If you are possessed by evil spirits again, don't blame Imperial Father for putting righteousness before family. Many thanks for Imperial Father's mercy." When Lu Xie heard this, he immediately became emotional and bowed with tears in his eyes. After saying this, he glanced at Yi Chen, then turned to Lu Hong and bowed again. "Imperial Father, this son has heard that brother-in-law's bravery is unparalleled in the world. Thus, this son earnestly requests that Imperial Father allow brother-in-law to teach this son. This way, this son can not only strengthen my body, but also help Imperial Father kill enemies and eradicate traitors." Chapter 661. When Yi Chen heard Lu Xie's words, his eyes narrowed and a cold light flashed in them. What a deep scheme! Damn it, is this little bastard really only 8 years old? Not only does he want to use me to eliminate Lu Hong's resentment towards him, but he also wants to use me to raise his position in Lu Hong's heart. He even wants to use this opportunity to brand me with this little bastard's label. It was no wonder that Yi Chen would think this way. Lu Xie's request was very reasonable and formal. Moreover, it was able to move Lu Hong very much. One had to know that when Lu Xie knelt down to Yi Chen to thank him, he was actually telling Lu Hong once again that he had no choice but to commit regicide and usurp the throne, so he could not be blamed. What he said just now was not only to justify his regicide and usurp the throne, but also to think of Lu Hong and the great Han Empire. But the truth was that once Lu Hong was moved and agreed, Yi Chen would be regarded as Lu Xie's man by all the civil and military officials. As for the reason, it was very simple. Who asked Yi Chen to be Lu Xie's master? In this way, Yi Chen, who had already made a name for himself, would definitely cause all the civil and military officials to lean towards Lu Xie's side. After all, Yi Chen was the peerless general of agile cavalry. He was too strong and too good at war. Most importantly, he had a large number of troops in his hands and the Xianyuan sword in his hand. He could fight whoever he wanted. It would be strange if all the civil and military officials did not lean towards Lu Xie's side. Of course, even if there were still people who were stubborn, it would at most be a portion of them. In this way, Lu Xie would have a chance to change the crown prince candidate in Lu Hong's heart. In the end, Lu Xie would step forward to become the crown prince of the Great Han Empire and inherit the empire. And this was Lu Xie's plan, or rather, Lu Xie's ultimate goal. Motherf asterisk Ker, you want to scheme against me? You really don't know how to live. Just as Yi Chen thought of this, Zhongli, who was standing next to Lu Hong's dragon throne, suddenly had a serious expression. He then bowed to Lu Hong and said, "Your Majesty, I think that ordinary generals are enough to teach the second prince. There is no need for you of Beech to teach him personally." Obviously, Zhongli had also seen through second prince Lu Hong's scheme. Otherwise, his expression would not have changed so abruptly. Moreover, he had even directly advised Lu Hong. The reason was simple. Zhongli was close to Lu Bian. Naturally, he did not want to see Lu Xie's scheme succeed. Lu Hong, who was stunned by Lu Xie's words, couldn't help but look at Zhongli when he heard this. "Father Rang, why is that?" "Reporting to your Majesty, the Great Han Empire's rebellion and the demon race's invasion have just been quelled by you of Beech. However, the situation is not completely stable yet. Moreover, it is unknown whether there are still demon race remnants in the Great Han Empire. If you of Beech gives up on stabilizing the Great Han Empire's current situation for the sake of the second prince, the Great Han Empire will inevitably be in turmoil again once there are rebels or demon race remnants." When Zhongli said this, the kneeling Lu Xie's expression suddenly changed. He was about to speak when he was interrupted by Zhongli. "Your Majesty, if that is all, there is no need to be too concerned. After all, you of Beech can lead troops to battle again. However, Your Majesty, you of Beech has already suffered heavy casualties in order to eliminate the Golden Scarf rebels and the demon race's invasion of the human realm. If you do not let the general of agile cavalry replenish the lost soldiers as soon as possible and speed up the training of the troops, once there is an uncontrollable change, then—" When Zhongli said this, he suddenly stopped. After hearing Zhang Li's explanation, Lu Hong's expression changed greatly. In the next second, Lu Hong glared fiercely at Lu Xie and then shouted, "You almost made a mistake. You almost ruined me, ruined my country. Step down. Without my order, you are not allowed to leave your palace. If you disobey, you will be killed without mercy." "Yes, Father." Lu Xie wanted to explain several times, but when he saw the hatred in Lu Hong's eyes, he finally gave up. After Lu Xie finished speaking, he bowed to Lu Hong, then looked at Yi Chen and bowed. "Brother-in-law, Lu Xie will take his leave." When Yi Chen heard this, he glanced at Lu Xie and then nodded. When Lu Xie saw this, he gave Yi Chen a bitter smile and then spoke again. "If the Great Han Empire is completely stabilized, I still hope that brother-in-law can spare some time to teach me a thing or two. If your Majesty gives the order, this king will definitely obey." Yi Chen smiled and then said. Yi Chen's expression did not change, but his words clearly told Lu Xie one thing. "If you want me to teach you, it has to be your father, Lu Hong, who gives the order personally." In fact, if not for the fact that Lu Xie could not die for the time being, Yi Chen would have killed this little bastard long ago. Who asked him to plot against Yi Chen again and again at such a young age, wanting to use Yi Chen to achieve his goal? If that's the case, Lu Xie will take his leave. After hearing Yi Chen's words, Lu Xie's expression suddenly changed. After taking a deep look at Yi Chen, he bowed to Yi Chen and directly left the hall after he finished speaking. Lu Hong glanced at Lu Xie's departing figure and frowned. Lu Hong was muddle-headed, but he was not stupid to the point of being stupid. At this time, it would be strange if Lu Hong still could not see Lu Xie's goal. After coming back to his senses, Lu Hong looked at Yi Chen and nodded with satisfaction. Obviously, Lu Hong liked Yi Chen's clear attitude very much. When Zhang Li, who was beside Lu Hong's dragon throne, saw this, he gave Yi Chen, who was on his side, a look. Then, he smiled flatteringly at Lu Hong. Your Majesty, the General of Agile Cavalry will be married in 5 days. How is your Majesty going to celebrate? Hearing this, Yi Chen glanced at Zhang Li, then bowed to Lu Hong and said, Your Majesty, it is a great fortune for me to marry the 2 princesses. Now, the great Han dynasty has been ravaged by the Golden Turban rebels and the Demon Clan. The people need to recuperate. It is really not suitable to be extravagant and wasteful. As soon as Yi Chen said this, Lu Hong's face suddenly sank, and Zhang Li's face suddenly changed. He hurriedly gave Yi Chen several looks. At this time, Yi Chen continued. However, it is a joyous occasion for me to marry the 2 princesses. It must be celebrated. Therefore, I am willing to take out some money and invite all the people of Luoyang to a banquet. As for the time, it is all up to your Majesty. When Yi Chen finished speaking, Lu Hong and Zhang Li were both stunned. After coming back to his senses, Lu Hong laughed heartily and then shouted, Good! Good! As expected of our good son-in-law. Congratulations, your Majesty! At this time, Zhang Li was beaming with joy as he bowed to Lu Hong. After hearing Zhang Li's compliment, Lu Hong smiled again and left the dragon throne. He walked a few steps to Yi Chen and patted Yi Chen's shoulder with great satisfaction. Honorable son-in-law, how about 7 days? Your Majesty said a few days, so it will be a few days. When Yi Chen heard this, he smiled and bowed. After saying this, he waved his right hand and 10 boxes of purple coins appeared in the hall. Chapter 662. When Lu Hong saw the 10 boxes of purple gold coins in the hall, his eyes immediately lit up and he excitedly said, Good! Good! 7 days it is. Luoyang was the capital of the great Han Empire and had a population of 10 million. The cost of 7 days' worth of food and drink didn't even add up to a box of purple gold coins. As for Yi Chen, he had taken out 10 boxes of purple gold coins. No matter how one looked at it, it was suspicious that he was putting on airs. But the truth was that Yi Chen wasn't putting on airs at all. He was doing it on purpose. It must be known that Lu Hong, the emperor of the great Han Empire, was famous for his greed for money. Otherwise, he wouldn't have publicly sold his position. Of course, this wasn't important. What was important was that Yi Chen had taken out money this time to curry favor with Lu Hong. After all, Lu Hong had suspected Yi Chen before. Even now, he might still be suspicious of Yi Chen. Otherwise, Lu Hong wouldn't have listened to Zhang Li's suggestion and specially recognized De Qiao and Xiao Qiao, whom he had never met before, as his daughters. Then, he would marry his 2 daughters to Yi Chen and tie Yi Chen to the imperial family's ship. As for Yi Chen's goal of currying favor with Lu Hong, it was actually so that the wedding could proceed smoothly. Of course, it was even more to completely dispel the few remaining suspicions in Lu Hong's heart. In order to achieve this goal, all Yi Chen needed to do was to say a few words and some money. To Yi Chen, no matter how much money he used, he wouldn't care. After all, what Yi Chen liked the most right now were still spirit stones, spirit medicines, all kinds of immortal grade materials, or even higher grade materials, treasures, and so on. The purchasing power of money was limited to a few things in the 3 Kingdoms beginners area. And to Yi Chen, these things were all trash. Thus, Yi Chen didn't care about money at all. As for Yi Chen saying that the people were living in poverty, it was actually to give Lu Hong a reason to openly collect money. After all, the marriage of the emperor's daughter was a joyous occasion for the whole city, and the emperor had to pay for it. However, according to Lu Hong's greedy and stingy personality, this matter was equivalent to cutting off another piece of meat from Lu Hong. However, whether it was out of courtesy or out of respect for Yi Chen, Lu Hong had to take the money. Now that Yi Chen had taken the initiative to give Lu Hong a reason to accept money openly, Lu Hong would be able to earn a large sum of money for nothing. How could Lu Hong not be happy? After Yi Chen heard Lu Hong's inexplicably excited laughter, he smiled faintly, then bowed solemnly and said, "Your Imperial Majesty, since there are still 5 days until the wedding, this humble subject will return and make some preparations. In 5 days, I will formally marry the Sunshine Princess and Princess Changle." "Good. Good." Hearing this, Lu Hong withdrew his gaze from the 10 chests of purple gold coins and said with a face full of smiles. Hearing this, Yi Chen was about to speak when Zhang Li suddenly walked to Lu Hong's side with a smile on his face. He bowed and said, "Your Imperial Majesty, Yu of Beech still doesn't have a residence in Luoyang. Should we prepare a residence for Yu of Beech? This way, on the day of Yu of Beech's wedding, you won't be criticized because you don't have a bridal chamber." "Correct, correct. Father Rang is correct. We have indeed overlooked this problem." Hearing this, Lu Hong paused for a moment before nodding his head. After saying this, Lu Hong rubbed his chin and frowned. In the next second, Lu Hong looked at Zhang Li and said, Father Rang, there are no vacant residences in Luoyang. Father Rang, within the city of Luoyang, there doesn't seem to be any vacant residences. If we were to build one now, I'm afraid there wouldn't be enough time." Hearing Lu Hong's words, Zhang Li smiled and bowed. "Your Imperial Majesty, this servant vaguely remembers that Great General He Jin has recently constructed a residence. It seems that the renovations have just been completed. How about we purchase that residence from Great General He Jin and use it as Yu of Beech's bridal chamber?" Hearing this, Yi Chen paused for a moment before involuntarily raising his eyebrows. Zhang Li had purposely brought up the bridal chamber and He Jin's newly constructed residence. In the end, he had suggested that Lu Hong purchase He Jin's residence. In reality, this was to disgust He Jin and make things difficult for He Jin. Of course, the other reason was to have Yi Chen pick a side. Yi Chen could naturally see this, but Yi Chen didn't mind. After all, Yi Chen had long since killed He Jin's son, He Xian. It could be said that there was no possibility of reconciliation between Great General He Jin and Yi Chen. Of course, Yi Chen wouldn't do anything to reconcile. After all, Yi Chen's goal was to unify the world and then ascend. It wasn't as if he wanted to be an official of the Great Han Empire. Why would he want to reconcile with He Jin? In fact, if He Jin wasn't the key to Dong Da's rebellion, Yi Chen would have already killed He Jin. He wouldn't have allowed him to live until now. Therefore, Yi Chen didn't mind Zhang Li's little thoughts. He didn't mind making things difficult for He Jin and standing against him. Of course, it wasn't that Yi Chen hadn't thought about buying a wedding house in Luoyang, but he didn't plan to do so at all. In Yi Chen's opinion, when he married Princess De Qiao and Princess Changle, he would just go through the formalities in Luoyang. After all the complicated ceremonial steps were over, he would directly bring De Qiao and Xiao Qiao back to Reincarnation Immortal City. After he had a house in Luoyang, Lu Hong wouldn't let De Qiao and Xiao Qiao go back to their parents' home every few days. Or, he might as well let De Qiao and Xiao Qiao live in Luoyang. In this way, although Lu Hong would be more at ease, De Qiao and Xiao Qiao would become hostages. This was not something Yi Chen wanted to see. However, thinking about it carefully, it didn't matter much whether there was a wedding house or not. As long as Lu Hong was suspicious of Yi Chen again, he would most likely bring De Qiao and Xiao Qiao to live in Luoyang and then use them as hostages. Therefore, after thinking about it for a while, Yi Chen didn't plan to fuss about the wedding house. There was no need to fuss about it, because if Lu Hong wanted to harm Yi Chen or De Qiao and Xiao Qiao, it would be impossible for him to succeed. After all, Yi Chen's strength as a god martial arts realm expert was obvious. Even if De Qiao and Xiao Qiao really became hostages, Yi Chen was 100% sure that he could directly take De Qiao and Xiao Qiao away and not let them suffer any danger. Just as Yi Chen thought of this, Lu Hong, who heard Zhang Li's suggestion, was slightly stunned. Then, his eyes suddenly lit up. In the next second, Lu Hong nodded with a smile and said, "Your father is right. This old man He Jin really knows how to enjoy life. He clearly has such a big house, but he still wants to build a new one. It's too shameless and wasteful. Your Majesty, this lowly subject is willing to bear all the expenses." After hearing this, Yi Chen glanced at the proud Zhang Li, before turning to Lu Hong and bowing, "Thank you." After saying this, Yi Chen waved his right hand, and 10 chests of violet gold appeared in the hall. When he saw the 10 chests of violet gold appear, Lu Hong immediately beamed. A second later, Lu Hong looked at Zhang Li and shouted, "Go! Summon that old man He Jin to see us." Chapter 663. Yes, Your Majesty. When Zhang Li heard this, he immediately gave a fawning smile and bowed. After saying this, he waved his hand at the entrance of the imperial palace. A second later, a young eunuch hastily ran over and bowed to Lu Hong. Zhang Li whispered a few words into the eunuch's ear, and the young eunuch hastily bowed. "Yes, this servant will go right away." After saying this, the young eunuch hastily left the imperial palace. When Yi Chen saw this, he couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. That old bastard He Jin was probably going to be swindled by Lu Hong this time. It was no wonder that Yi Chen thought this way. After all, Lu Hong was the emperor of the great Han Empire, and he was extremely greedy for money. Buying He Jin's newly built residence sounded nice, but in the end, Lu Hong definitely wouldn't spend a single cent. Yi Chen was very clear on this point, but being clear was one thing. Yi Chen still had to fork out the money. Otherwise, how could Lu Hong be even more happy? Of course, it was only a bit of money. Yi Chen wouldn't spend it no matter how he spent it, so why would he care? With this thought, Yi Chen once again looked at Lu Hong and bowed. "Your Majesty, I'll leave the matter of the bridal chamber to Your Majesty. This lowly subject will go back and make some preparations to avoid any mishaps during the wedding of the 2 princesses 5 days from now." When Lu Hong heard this, he laughed and patted Yi Chen on the shoulder. "Worthy son-in-law, rest assured. We will definitely handle the matter of the bridal chamber properly. If He Jin dares to refuse, we will take his dog head." Lu Hong's words were filled with intimacy with Yi Chen. There was nothing to be done about it. After all, this good son-in-law of his, Yi Chen, had given him batch after batch of purple gold. This wasn't something that gold coins could compare to. Even Lu Hong had never seen so many purple gold coins, so how could he not be excited? How could he not be intimate with Yi Chen? When Yi Chen heard this, he immediately bowed gratefully. "Many thanks, Your Majesty. There's no need to be so courteous. Worthy son-in-law, quickly go back and prepare." Lu Hong chuckled and nodded. "Yes, Your Majesty, this lowly subject will take his leave." When Yi Chen heard this, he gave a heavy nod and bowed. After he finished, he turned and left the hall. The moment Your Majesty, Your Majesty, Your Majesty, Your Majesty, Your Majesties, Your Majesty, Your Majesty. For the 2 princesses, Your Majesty, you of Beech, did not hesitate to spend a large sum of money to buy a wedding house and invite all the people of the city to a banquet. You must be extremely satisfied with this wedding. Otherwise, you would not have done this. Father is right. I didn't expect that my good son-in-law would be willing to fork out so much money for this marriage. Lu Hong laughed when he heard this and then said. Zhang Li nodded with a smile and said, "From this, your Majesty can see that your Majesty is loyal to your Majesty. From this, it can be seen that Lord Ghost King is truly loyal to His Majesty and understands His Majesty's difficulties. If it were someone else, it would already be considered good if they could take out 1/10,000th of what Lord Ghost King is capable of. Indeed, today, it is all thanks to my good son-in-law. If not for him, I would really be in danger today." Lu Hong heard this and nodded, then sighed. On the way from the palace hall to the palace gate, Yi Chen, who had been releasing his divine sense, could not help but raise his eyebrows when he heard the conversation between Zhang Li and Lu Hong. Damn it, I have finally dispelled Lu Hong's suspicions. However, this matter was also thanks to that idiot Li Mubai. If not for him, I would not have been able to put on a show of saving the emperor. The matter here could be considered settled. I only have to wait for the wedding in 5 days. Next, it was time to meet those mysterious forces. Thinking of this, Yi Chen's mind moved, and the spiritual sense he released instantly became stronger. In the next second, everything within 200,000 miles of Yi Chen was covered by Yi Chen's divine sense. After 10 minutes, Yi Chen narrowed his eyes and sped up toward the palace gate. After Yi Chen left the palace, he walked directly to an empty corner. Then, with a thought, the space in front of him instantly distorted. After glancing at the distorted space, Yi Chen stepped into it and disappeared. Yu Province, Runan County, in the hall of a large house with 3 entrances and 3 exits. A white-haired old man listened to a middle-aged man's report and immediately frowned. In the next second, the white-haired old man looked at the middle-aged man and asked in a deep voice, "Zichu, are those disciples really all dead?" "Yes, father. After I received this news, I went offline to check. The results were exactly the same as what was said on the World Channel." The middle-aged man nodded and said. When the white-haired old man heard this, he frowned again. After a while, the white-haired old man narrowed his eyes and said, "If that's the case, not only was Li Mubai killed by Yi Chen, but the Green Lotus sword art also fell out." "Yes, father. The technique Yi Chen used in Ba County was sword energy. Moreover, it was cyan sword energy. It was the exact same color as the sword energy Li Mubai released when he used his sword." The middle-aged man nodded with an unsightly expression as he spoke. After the middle-aged man finished speaking, the expression of a young man sitting below the middle-aged man changed. He looked at the white-haired old man and said, "Grandfather, the key isn't who got the Green Lotus sword art. The key is that the sword chi of the Green Lotus sword art can directly wipe out the soul. That's the most terrifying part." A youth a few years younger than the young man coldly smiled and said, "I knew it. We should have killed Li Mubai earlier and taken his Green Lotus sword art. You said it wasn't the right time. Look at it now. The sword chi released by the Green Lotus sword art can wipe out the soul, and it was even obtained by Yi Chen. If Yi Chen comes looking for us, I'd like to see what you can do to stop him." "Shut up. How rude." When the middle-aged man heard this, he was instantly enraged and shouted at the young man in a deep voice. After the young man heard the middle-aged man's words, his face suddenly became incomparably red. He stood up with a ting and then shouted loudly, "I'm telling the truth. We should have killed Li Mubai earlier and taken his Green Lotus sword art. The one who can wipe out the soul with sword chi is us. Unfilial son. Shut up." When the middle-aged man saw the youth talking back to him, his face darkened and he yelled angrily. When the youth heard this, he snorted coldly and looked at the white-haired old man saying, "Grandfather, I've said time and time again that your methods are no longer popular, but you just don't believe me. Look at it now. The Green Lotus sword art can wipe out the soul directly, and it was even obtained by Yi Chen. When Yi Chen comes looking for us, not to mention opening the secret realm, even the 100 or so people in our Li family might not be able to survive." Chapter 664. Zhang. Hearing this, the young man's expression changed, and he hurriedly shouted, "Pa!" A loud slap could be heard. The middle-aged man who slapped the young man quickly looked at the white-haired old man and said, "Father, this young man grew up in this country. Father, this child grew up in a foreign country. As his father, I've lost in discipline. Please don't be angry. Forget it. No matter what, he's still the blood of the Li family. Moreover, Zhang isn't wrong." The white-haired old man sighed and waved his hand. The young man, who was covering his face with his eyes red, couldn't help but be stunned when he heard this. Clearly, he didn't expect the white-haired old man to not blame him. At this moment, the white-haired old man stood up and left his seat. He walked over to the young man in a few steps and patted the young man's shoulder. He then said emotionally, "Zhang, it's all grandfather's fault. Don't hate grandfather. Grandfather." The young man couldn't help but be stunned when he heard this. He then called out. Hearing this, the white-haired old man sighed again and said, "Zhang, your suggestion was correct. Zhang, although you were young, your suggestion was right. If Grandpa had listened to your suggestion and taken down Li Mubai, the Green Lotus Sword spell would have indeed become the property of the Li family." "Father!" The middle-aged man's expression changed greatly when he heard this. After coming back to his senses, he hurriedly called out, "Father!" Clearly, the middle-aged man heard a dangerous signal from the white-haired old man's words. Otherwise, he wouldn't have acted like this. Hearing this, the white-haired old man glared at the middle-aged man and then looked at the young man. "Zhang, you have to remember one thing. You can be vicious and heartless, but you can't ignore your family. If grandfather had really killed Li Mubai back then, your second grandfather definitely wouldn't have let it go. At that time, our Li family would definitely fall apart. Do you understand? But Li Mubai is only a bastard born of a prostitute. He's not even in the Li family's genealogy. How can he be considered a member of the Li family? Would second grandfather fall out with our branch because of him?" The young man was slightly stunned and then spoke. Hearing this, the white-haired old man glanced at the young man and then said, "No matter what Li Mubai's background is, the blood of the Li family still flows in his veins. This is a fact that no one can change. But Li Mubai doesn't recognize second grandpa and isn't willing to hand over the Green Lotus Sword art. How can he be considered a member of the Li family?" the young man said with a gloomy face. When the white-haired old man heard this, he let out a long sigh. In fact, Li Mubai already had the idea of contributing the Green Lotus Sword spell. How is that possible? He already had such thoughts. Why would he run away from home? When the young man heard this, he was stunned. Then, he said in shock. When the white-haired old man heard this, he sighed and said, "That's right. Li Mubai running away was actually the idea of Grandpa and your second grandpa. It's because your second grandpa accidentally saw a treasure recorded in the inheritance information in a safe city not far away, the 9 turns in balcony. With it, he could continuously rebuild his account, and there was a high chance that he would become a native of the game world. After Li Mubai heard of your second grandpa's plan, he directly went to that safe city and used poison to control the sect that had the 9 turns in balcony. In the end, on the 9th time, he successfully became Lu Xie. Unfortunately, he still failed in the end and even lost the Green Lotus Sword art. Then why didn't second grandpa directly snatch the 9 turns in balcony back and let others try it? This would be much better than Li Mubai personally trying it, right?" The young man was slightly stunned and then asked in bewilderment. When the white-haired old man heard this, he sighed and said, "The 9 turns in balcony can only be used once. The 9 revolutions in balcony can only be used 9 times. Furthermore, it can only be used by someone who possesses a Xiantian level cultivation technique or above. In the entire Li family, only Li Mubai meets this requirement. So that's how it is. However, Now that Yi Chun has obtained the Green Lotus sword art and has cultivated it to the point where it can directly wipe out the soul, and even easily destroy the demon-slaying sword formation, what if he finds the Li family? None of us can stop Yi Chun. When the young man heard this, he nodded and asked. When the white-haired old man heard this, he let out a long sigh and said, Zhangwen, the descendants of the Li family have to contribute to the Li family in life and death. Do you understand? Father! The middle-aged man's face, which had already changed drastically, immediately turned pale. When the young man heard the middle-aged man's words that were filled with fear, he couldn't help but be stunned for a moment. Then, he looked at the white-haired old man in confusion and asked, Grandpa, what do you mean? Zhangwen, the Li family needs a scapegoat. We don't need an unfilial descendant who doesn't respect his elders. Do you understand? The white-haired old man patted the young man's shoulder and said. When the young man heard this, his expression changed drastically and he roared angrily, You old fart, I was wondering why you were so abnormal and explained so much to me. It turns out that you want to use me as a scapegoat. When Yi Chun tracks down our Li family, you'll push me out and apologize to Yi Chun. When the white-haired old man heard this, he glanced at the young man expressionlessly and said, All right, I've said everything that needs to be said. Zhangwen, it's time for you to go. When he finished speaking, he waved his right hand and a dagger that emitted a strange aura appeared in an instant. Then, he stabbed at the top of the young man's head. When the middle-aged man saw this, he was shocked and cried out sorrowfully, No! Father, I beg you, spare Zhangwen. At this moment, the young man directly leaped and dodged the white-haired old man's dagger. Before he could steady himself, he shouted at the middle-aged man and the young man, Father! Big brother! Don't you understand? This old fart doesn't treat us as his family at all. If he treats me like this today, he'll do the same to you in the future for his great cause. However, as soon as the young man finished speaking, a sharp cold light flashed and disappeared. In the next second, the young man's head instantly flew up. Then, the young man's soul was continuously devoured by a cloud of gray gas. In the blink of an eye, it was completely devoured. At the same time, an old man with a head full of gray hair suddenly appeared beside the young man. To be precise, he was beside the headless young man. The white-haired old man glanced at the gray-haired old man, then looked at the middle-aged man and said coldly, Pass down the order. Everyone is to go offline immediately and retreat into the family's secret realm. Yes, Father. The middle-aged man looked at the white-haired old man with bloodshot eyes and nodded in response. The white-haired old man looked directly at the gray-haired old man and said, Laifu, I'll leave this place to you. If Yi Chun tracks down here, you'll be the one to explain. As for your only son, De Chang, I'll arrange everything for him. Yes, Patriarch. When the gray-haired old man heard this, he nodded calmly and bowed. At this moment, the space in the hall suddenly distorted. In the next second, a young man took a step forward and appeared there. When the white-haired old man, the gray-haired old man, and the middle-aged father and son saw the young man who suddenly appeared, their eyes narrowed and they shouted in shock. Yi Chun! Chapter 665. The 3 Li clan members and a servant in the hall had all considered the possibility that Yi Chun would trace them here. However, in their opinion, the probability of this happening wasn't very high for the time being. After all, they hadn't shown their faces at all, nor had they revealed any information about the Li clan. However, it was better to be safe than sorry. If Yi Chun really traced them here, then no matter what they did or said, it would be useless. After all, Yi Chun was a God martial realm expert. If they didn't leave by the time he reached here, then there would only be one result. They would be killed by Yi Chun. It was precisely because of this concern that the Li clan head had his son pass on a message, ordering everyone to log off and return to the real world. Then, they would retreat into the clan's secret realm, preparing to temporarily avoid Yi Chun. Of course, this alone wasn't enough to guarantee the safety of the Li clan. Because after Yi Chen arrived here and discovered that the building was empty, he would definitely continue to investigate. In order to be on the safe side, the Li family's patriarch had ruthlessly killed that young man. He was prepared to wait for Yi Chen to track down the Li family before pushing the young man out to apologize to Yi Chen. In this way, the Li clan would have a high chance of escaping Yi Chen's revenge. As for casually using someone to take the blame, it wasn't that the Li clan head hadn't thought of it. However, in the end, the Li clan head dispelled this idea. After all, Yi Chen's deeds were there for all to see. He was overbearing, ruthless, and could even be said to be brutal. If he casually pushed someone out to deceive Yi Chen, it was very likely that Yi Chen would discover it. Then, the Li clan would be in danger of being annihilated. This wasn't the result that the Li clan head wanted to see. However, the Li clan's patriarch, who had calculated everything, didn't expect Yi Chen to come so quickly. In fact, even though the Li clan had obtained many inheritances before the meteor fell and knew a lot of information related to cultivation, in the end, they still didn't have an accurate understanding of the god martial realm. At such a realm, a divine martial realm expert could extend his divine sense to a range of 100,000 miles. As for Yi Chen, a divine martial realm expert, his divine sense could extend to 200,000 miles. Otherwise, Yi Chen would not have released his divine sense to investigate the conversations of all the players in this area when he left the Imperial Palace. And the result was very smooth. Yi Chen directly locked onto the Li clan and then came here. Yi Chen curled his lips in disdain when he heard their exclamations. In fact, Yi Chen could have appeared in the hall long ago. It was just that when Yi Chen was preparing to appear, his divine sense detected the Li clan's patriarch, who was wantonly explaining Li Mubai. As a result, Yi Chen gave up on the idea of appearing directly. After all, Yi Chen still didn't understand what Li Mubai had said before he died. And just now, the Li clan's patriarch wanted his grandson to die in peace, so Yi Chen naturally wouldn't interrupt the Li clan's patriarch's long-winded speech. And now Yi Chen finally knew Li Mubai's origins, and also understood why Li Mubai suddenly changed his trajectory in his previous life and ran to possess Lu Xie. He also knew what the great secret Li Mubai spoke of was. In fact, even Yi Chen didn't expect that the Li clan, one of the hidden and mysterious factions in his previous life, would actually have two secret realms. One could be entered, while the other was yet to be opened. Otherwise, the Li clan's patriarch wouldn't have said, "Retreat into the clan's secret realm," and the Li clan's descendant who was killed by the Li clan's patriarch also wouldn't have said something like, "Open that secret realm." As expected, the hidden factions in his previous life all obtained many benefits. Thinking of this, Yi Chen glanced at the thoroughly dead youth on the ground, and then looked at the white-haired old man and the dagger in the gray-haired old man's hand. In the next second, Yi Chen's eyes suddenly narrowed. The soul-devouring dagger. The soul-devouring dagger was a special weapon that had the ability to devour souls. However, the soul-devouring dagger had a limit to the number of times it could be used, and it also had an extremely high requirement for the strength of the soul. To be precise, in order to unleash the power of the soul-devouring dagger, the target's realm must not be higher than the Purple Mansion realm. Otherwise, it would lose its effect. Of course, no matter how great the limitations of the soul-devouring dagger were, it was once hyped to the skies in Yi Chen's previous life. Although people quickly discovered the insignificant characteristics of the soul-devouring dagger as their cultivation increased. But before this discovery, the soul-devouring dagger was in the limelight for a period of time. As for the reason, it was because the soul-devouring dagger could devour human souls. He didn't expect that the soul-devouring dagger that was in the limelight in his previous life would actually appear here. Could it be that the Blood Hangman in his previous life was created by the Li clan? The Blood Hangman was a very famous assassin organization in the Eldritch world in Yi Chen's previous life. Their standard weapon was the soul-devouring dagger. In the beginning, the Blood Hangman was in the limelight because they directly killed many players. At that time, the players were extremely afraid of the Blood Hangman. They even shuddered at the mention of the Blood Hangman. But later on, the characteristic that the soul-devouring dagger's soul-devouring ability was not effective on players above the Purple Mansion realm was discovered by the players. From then on, the Blood Hangman began a period of extremely tragic history. Usually, the players would gather in groups to search for the Blood Hangman members. Then, they would rush forward and kill the Blood Hangman members on the spot. Then, they would camp their corpses and kill them again, over and over again. Thinking of this, Yi Chen couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. Then, with a wave of his right hand, the golden greatsword, the Xianyuan sword, instantly appeared in Yi Chen's right hand. When the Li clan leader saw this, his expression suddenly changed, but he immediately regained his composure. In the next second, the Li clan leader bowed to Yi Chen and said, "Li Zhangqing pays his respects to you, Lord Beach. May I know what business you, Lord Beach, has with you, Lord Beach?" "What business?" When Yi Chen heard this, he smiled coldly and shouted, "I want your lives." When the Li clan leader heard this, his heart couldn't help but thump. After doing his best to stabilize his suddenly violently beating heart, the Li clan leader bowed to Yi Chen and said, "The matter of scheming against you, Lord Beach, was indeed caused by the unfilial descendants of the Li clan. Now, this old man has used the clan's laws to execute this child. Please forgive me, Lord Beach." When Yi Chen heard this, he curled his lips in disdain. Yi Chen had heard the Li clan leader's conversation in the hall from beginning to end. How could he be fooled by a few words? After coldly glancing at the Li clan's clan head, Yi Chen slapped with his left hand. An extremely berserk, killing intent instantly appeared, and locked the four people in the hall in place. In the next second, Yi Chen pointed the Xianyuan sword at the Li clan leader and asked, "Where is your location in the real world?" Yi Chen naturally came here to get rid of the mysterious hidden power of the Li clan. Who told them to scheme against Yi Chen? However, Yi Chen already knew that the Li clan still had an unopened secret realm, so he naturally wouldn't miss it. One had to know that a secret realm that hadn't been opened by the Li clan was 100% a high-level secret realm. Everything inside was in a dust-covered state. If Yi Chen could obtain this secret realm, he would certainly obtain a large amount of good stuff. It would even be more than what Yi Chen had obtained when he plundered the Yao clan's secret realm. As for what he would obtain, Yi Chen wasn't very clear. However, Yi Chen was very clear about one thing. He had to obtain this unopened secret realm. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.